Hi. right, everybody, welcome. Going to call this meeting to order. Can we do a roll call? Mrs. Widener.
Dr. Campley, Mr. Fountain,
Here.
Mr. Keenan,
Here.
Mr. Liggett,
Here.
Mr. McKinney,
Here.
Mrs. Sadler,
Here.
Mr. Saylor,
Here.
Dr. Weston, Ms. White.
Here. And so for items 103 and 104, just before we go ahead with the pledge and the mission statement, what I wanted to do was to just have a conversation very briefly about the way that the agenda is written in incorporating a moment of silence or reflection. So last week when we had our board meeting, one of the things that I spoke about at the reorg after I gave my comments was trying to move forward with intention and thoughtfulness in how we all come to the table here to conduct the business of the board and the business of the school district. So in some conversations that I had with Mr. McKinney after he was appointed with me as vice president, it was really to sit with how we are going to move forward and present just in general, as I mentioned. So the moment of silence in line with the Pledge of Allegiance is something that our high school does as part of their day-to-day. And I would really like to see if everyone would be open to allowing that to take place.
I have a point of
During the
information.
meeting. Yes, Mr. Saylor.
So the agenda build out is done through policy 6, correct? So are we altering policy 6 today?
So that would be my request. My request would be to include and incorporate, and we don't have to say moment of silence. It could be moment of reflection or moment of thoughtful, I actually don't know exactly what they say verbatim at the high school in the morning. But I think that would be helpful in allowing us to acknowledge, those that need some silent acknowledgement. I don't know if anybody's opposed to that, or and I'm open to the conversation of it, but I actually asked for it to be here just specifically so we could discuss it.
And as thinking about this or whatever, I think we actually need to take time and we need to pause to think about what type of community we want to be. And to continually think about that, I think has meaning, because if we come here every week to want to fight, that doesn't do anything for anyone. So as we think about and reflect upon what the role of this board is and what the role of this district is and how we educate our children, if we continue to throw rocks at one another, stick each other with sticks or whatever, we will never move forward in any way, what shape or form. So for those of you who are here tonight or whatever, to have arguments or grievances or whatever, there was an election. It was a referendum election. Overwhelmingly, the community spoke. And what we need to do is we need to find ways to come together and work together. And if you can't do that, you are not helping any of our kids. So I ask you to think about that and seriously reflect upon what it is you hope to do, because the kids matter.
So I've said this before, these meetings are in public, not for public. So you're asking the board to supersede policy, to change policy on the fly without a motion. And I sent an email about this earlier today and didn't get a response. So you've already adjusted this, says Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence. Board policy 6 just says Pledge of Allegiance. So you're asking the board to supersede policy, change policy on the fly, correct?
I'm asking for
I'll make the motion. I'm just clarifying, is that what you're asking?
I'm asking for consideration to incorporate this. This is something that has come up as a board discussion item previously, and it was ignored. And so I personally feel as though a moment of reflection, of silent reflection, is more purposeful than just reciting something from rote. That's my personal feeling, but I am open to dialogue and conversation about it. Yes, Dr. Campley.
So I definitely, I do like the idea of a moment of silence. I think it does give us pause right before we start, just to kind of take in a moment and think about what we're here for, the purpose of the evening. It aligns with what we do at the high school, so I do see your rationale. But I know one of the things we're trying to do is also line back up with following practices and procedures. So I think it would be one of those things where, in all fairness, we're talking about it. I think we could probably all agree it wouldn't be a bad thing to add, but we should probably follow the same practice of, can we put it on for the policy committee meeting to see if we could adjust that policy to include the moment of silence, and then maybe do it next time.
I think that's really reasonable, and I appreciate taking the opportunity to have the conversation. Does anybody have anything else to add about that? Mr. Liggett?
Yes. Policy 6 states what the meeting must include. It doesn't state what it can't include. So while I appreciate the fact that we would like to possibly add this to the policy, in my opinion, I don't think it's necessary and could be done because it is pre-published before the meeting. And as I said, it is not, what's in policy 6 is not exclusive. It tells you what you must include.
It says that, Mr. Liggett, it says that item C of our meeting is the Pledge of Allegiance. It doesn't say that item C of our meeting is the Pledge of Allegiance and something else. You want to add item D or CA, that's different.
I had indicated that, and I don't have the policy in front. I can open a policy. I don't have it open at this point, but it would be a change of policy if the item was added. And the board does have discretion to do that without following the policy procedure, but it would be a change of policy.
It has already been changed. It's on the screen. It's on the published agenda.
Well, I think the point of the discussion is whether or not the board was in agreement with that change, and there is a suggestion that that be deferred.
So, I mean, and go ahead, I'm sorry, Dr. Weston.
Just in anticipation of further discussion of this at a future policy committee meeting, would it be appropriate that something like this could be requested on an ad hoc or an occasional basis? Is that out of line?
It's not out of line. The board has the option, because it's a board policy and not a legal requirement. If the board a majority of the board members opted to do so, they could change the agenda item for this evening. If it's referred to policy, it would be discussed at the policy committee meeting. A recommendation for a change of policy could potentially be presented to the board at a future meeting for a first and second reading pursuant to the established policy procedure. The board has the discretion to change policy on an ad hoc basis if it determined to do so.
Dr. Campley?
So, personally, I feel that when we're having this conversation here, it hasn't occurred. We did not actually have this said moment of silence. We're having the conversation first. So yes, is it on here? Yes, but did we do it?
Well, it's been on there since the draft agenda.
Right.
Went out on Wednesday. Correct.
But we did not actually do it. So,
Right.
in my opinion, if we don't do it, technically nothing changed to the policy. We can send it to policy committee, and quite frankly, this conversation can be paused, and we can talk about it later, and we can move on to much more pressing issues than whether or not we have a moment of silence. Because quite frankly, I think there's a whole audience of community members here that I'm sure did not come here to hear us deliberate whether or not we're going to have a moment of silence.
And I wasn't looking for deliberation,
No,
to be
I-
honest. I
and I
just was
understand that.
honestly trying to give some context as to the intention setting that I really do want to approach these meetings with. So I am fine, actually, Mrs. Widener, if we can remove the verbiage of that from this week's meeting, we will have proper conversation, as long as, Dr. Russ, do you have something to add?
The only thing I want to make sure of, Mr. Subers, does Ms. White need to make a motion to amend the agenda before doing that technically? I don't want to violate another policy if that's the case currently.
I would suggest that we move forward with the Pledge of Allegiance, the reading of the mission statement, and then at the approval of the agenda, it will be approval of the agenda with the
Revision.
revision.
Okay. All right. So that being said, we'll move forward with the Pledge of Allegiance at this time. Please stand. Reading of the I'm sorry, my mic was off. Item 1.04 is the reading of the Perkiomen Valley mission statement. And so this is another one of those moments where what I would like to do going forward is just to make sure that we all have purposeful intention as we are investing time and effort towards the work of the school district. And so starting tonight, I would like to have a different guest speaker read rather than you just hear me read. Mr. Liggett, would you be willing to read the mission statement for the school district, please?
Certainly. Let me pull it up here. Sorry for the pause. I wasn't expecting to be doing this. Thank you, Rowan.
Agenda.
It's on the agenda. I'm looking all over. Thank you very much, though. The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally.
Thank you, Mr. Liggett. I appreciate that. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
That's all right. I
Makes-
literally was
I wanna
looking
just make sure
everywhere
everybody's
else
going to be
for
paying
it.
attention going forward. Right, perfect. 1.05 is the approval of the agenda, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and second. Are there any discussions?
I have an amendment. As Mr. Suber suggested, I move to approve the agenda as provided with the additional change to 1.03, just stating Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Saylor. Are there any other comments or discussion? Dr. Weston?
Mr. Saylor, could you repeat that? I didn't catch it.
1.03 shall read Pledge of Allegiance and Pledge of Allegiance only.
And I do have my policy open at this point, and it does read that unless amended by a majority of the board members present, the regular business meeting shall include the following items, and item C is the Pledge of Allegiance. So,
Okay, and then I guess we got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Against? Okay, agenda passes. 1.06 is the approval of the minutes, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes pass. And 1.07, I am very proud and happy to pass over the meeting to Dr. Russell and Mr. McKinney with a special recognition for our Perkiomen Valley Marching Vikings.
Mr. Moran, if that's a bit too loud, you can turn it down a bit there if you need to. So, Mr. McKinney and I are here this evening to recognize our high school marching band. And we would like to invite band director, Mr. Dave Overholtzer, up. And we're going to come into this space so that our students, our marching band members, can also be in this space and be front and center on the camera, as well as the majority of you here in the room. But it is with great pleasure that I hand over the mic to Mr. Overholtzer, and he is going to help to introduce the students really by groups in our marching band and recognize them as state champions as well as national champions.
Just as we expect excellence in the classroom, I think this is a shining example of Perkiomen Valley excellence outside of the classroom. So these students are to be commended for their excellence in the craft that they have chosen to do. Whether their musicianship or their pageantry, they are champions and we're very proud of them. So let's have another round of applause for them.
All right. Still clapping. We're actually going to be beginning with the color guard. So now that you guys are all up here, if you want to reorganize so that the guard's near the front, that's going to save us some time in the long run. We can switch it. All right, don't reorganize. I've been told. This is great. So we'll start with the wins, which would be Arnold. The next one would be perfect. All right, so we're going to begin with our winds section. For those of you that aren't familiar, the winds are the trumpets, clarinets, trombones, baritones, tubas, etc., flutes. And they're going to be alphabetical, so you guys can be somewhat ready for that. All right, so we'll begin with Andrew Arnold. Should I do the old please hold your applause till they're all done? It could be a while. All right, next is Camden Burwager. That didn't work. On their way. I'll just keep going with the names. I think that's a great idea. Liam Chang, and then Evan Croy, and then Jayla Daniels, and Lucy DeLeon Marican, David Deacle, Grayson M., Malachi Angle, Joseph Ferenchik, Owen Hamilton, Trevor Hess, Matthew Hirsch, Lindsay Hoffman, Kaylee Harrell, Pearson Harrell, Robert Ianeri, Natalie Klobasicki, Emily Nee, Abigail Legal, Iris Malloy, Benjamin Morissette, Jane Nye, Basil Ofosu Danku, Gavin Piperno, Jack Santos Suso, Eleanor Santos Suso, James Shingara, Liam Spiker, and Penny White. Everybody's doing a great job. Thank you.
So do we want to get a group picture here?
And just the wins here? Okay. I should not be right in the
Got a
middle.
little quick, so you may want to check the name on the certificate. Might have to do a little swap. We could do them when we go outside. We could swap, do some swaps. Okay. Any other board members want to hop in? They're doing them by groups. The winds, the percussion. I think we're going to do a big one outside. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And then wins, right? Okay, if you guys can meet outside, and then we're going to get the other two groups, and then we'll get one big group one outside.
This is fantastic. So leave.
Go that way.
All right, so we'll move on to our percussion section next, once there's room for them. They usually move faster for me. It's fine. All right, we will begin with Gavin Arsenich. Sam Brockett. Frank Bono. Ethan Chase. Rachel Dubrow. Angie L. Galway. Alicia Hoffman. Mina Isaac. Dana Leinhauser. Anna Malloy. Madison McCartney. Skylar Menser. Hope Sorrow. Aiden Sassman. Ryan Shive. Joshua Stebner. Jackson Sullivan. And Ripley Valerio.
Okay, ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Good job. Excellent. Excellent. We'll meet you guys outside for the group picture. Oh, do you know what? Here's some others. So, you know, when we go outside, I think they're all just mixed up.
Everybody's doing a great job. All right, next we'll have our color guard. So we begin. Alex Atherton, Abby Batchelder, Kaylee Coyle, Taylor Dillon, Sophia Hoffman, Mariana Madrigal, Kiera McCartney, Delaney Rudder, Asher Shingara, and Caitlin Stebner.
Okay, let's meet outside.
So we will have a brief recess while we meet outside for a photo, and then we will be right back in to reconvene the meeting. Thank you. You know what? Is everybody back? All right, so I think if we're all back and ready to go, Mr. Liggett,
Sorry.
I mean, come on.
Madam President.
Unpreparedness is
Yes,
my
go
theme
ahead.
tonight.
Mr. Subers, I reconvene the meeting.
Thank you. If I could, and my apologies. 2 items I think we need to correct for the record. On the motion to amend the agenda, in checking with the board secretary, there was not a second to that motion. So I would recommend that the board make a motion to approve the agenda with the deletion of the moment of silence. And I would suggest that the presiding officer ask for a motion and a second on that.
I so move.
Okay, motion and a second. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and move that forward then.
You have to
Go
vote.
ahead.
Vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
And one other item, on the approval of the minutes, and this is my fault, I should have pointed out to the president that as presiding officer, technically under Robert's rules of order, the presiding officer cannot make the motion, so I would request that a motion to approve the minutes be made again, and a second.
I so move.
Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Thank
And
you.
that passes as well. I appreciate the grace in the learning of the process. When you read a section, you offer a motion, so I'll get that for next time. And we are at 1.08, comments on any topic. You have 3 minutes. Anyone that would like to make a comment, I will go through the folks that signed in, indicating that they would like to speak first. And you please state your name and your municipality. And again, please keep in mind that should behavior not be acceptable in a classroom, it is also not acceptable at a school board meeting for the school district. So with that, I will call Shawna McGee to the podium.
Also, Ms. White, can you reference again that, the board will not answer direct questions?
Oh, yes, correct. So should there be anything posed to the board with regards to a question during the comment period, if the board or the administration should elect to respond, they would do so at the end of the meeting during board comment.
Shona McGee, Skippack Township. I know we're all here for the same reasons, because we love our children and we want the best for them. While we may not all agree on certain topics, I know we can all agree on that. Safety is a huge issue in the district right now. We just had a violent incident in our high school, and I'm so glad to see the community come together to help the victim and our family, and I truly hope justice will be served both legally and the district will do the right thing and not allow the assailants back into our district. I want to ask the board to send the anti-bullying policy to the policy committee to be reviewed and clearly define the process of reporting and handling bullying specifically, as well as specific training for students. I've been told multiple times from way too many kids that they don't know who they can talk to about being bullied, as they report it and are told it will be looked into and nothing happens. There needs to be a clear, definitive process and consequences that are actually implemented. We as parents need to do better teaching tolerance and acceptance and accountability to our children to cut the bullying at the source. Popular unpopular subject, Policy 720. I want to point to the fact that this policy was implemented against the recommendation of administration, who said that it should go through the policy committee process, which the policy committee was in the midst of working with administration to develop a policy when this was put in place. So this was not the recommendation of the policy committee or administration, and that the policy committee process was prematurely truncated. My child is a senior here. It's supposed to be their best year, right? Well, they haven't been in school in person since September 19th, out of fear for their safety due to the animosity in and out of the school, which this policy has created, the policy that was created in the name of safety. They're forced to do asynchronous school online for their safety. When you feel unsafe, you're unable to learn. We have all discussed this and agreed to that point. So my child has no access to supports, no access to the library during the school day, and are separated from their peers and friends, which does a number on one's mental health. According to Policy 832, which is access to equitable resources, states that each student shall be provided equitable access to instructional materials, assessments, curriculum, support, facilities, teaching practices, and other educational resources and services that reflect an appreciation for the diverse cultural perspectives, identities, and needs of students and their families by strategically differentiating allocations as necessary to remove barriers and improve outcomes. Therefore, I believe Policy 720 to be a barrier to learning that needs to be removed. I implore the board to deactivate this discriminatory policy effective immediately and send it back to the policy committee. And if that is not possible for whatever reason, please allow administration for certain exceptions to comply with Policy 832. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Leonetti.
Debbie Leonetti, Skipback Township. Congratulations and welcome to the new board members. You have your work cut out for you. I will start off with a question. Where are the police officers that were voted in by this board last spring? It has been over 6 months, and considering the 2 recent violent attacks at the high school, clearly they are needed now more than ever. I think we can all agree that the safety of our students should be the utmost importance. No time was wasted hiring a new assistant superintendent. Why is this taking so long? At last week's board meeting, I sat and heard the heart-wrenching account from the girl that was attacked, gang style, I might add, her friends and her mother. At the end of that exceptionally long meeting, which many of us had to leave, it was stated that our new board president, that Policy 720 would be up for repeal at tonight's meeting. Are you sure the safety of our students is your priority? Remember, Policy 720 bleeds into the locker rooms and to sports. An open bathroom policy invites predatory behavior. Girls will not be safe. Will you hire bathroom monitors? How will you determine who gets to choose their bathroom? How will you control visitors' behaviors? Will they be able to choose as well? I have not heard of any issues with the current policy in place. You will need to prove that before you throw it out. That is not working. There was an assembly the other day to explain to the students how to handle a fight in school. They were told that they could try and stop it and they would not get in trouble. Do you really think this is any type of a solution? How about getting the police in place, retraining security guards, installing more cameras, and having a no-tolerance policy for fighting and bullying? We have a culture problem in our school and in our country right now. I do not expect the school to take full responsibility for that, but the least you can do is keep our kids safe while they're in the building. I sat through many board meetings throughout the year when a few board members accused our former president of an agenda. Hearing that your priority is to overturn 720 sure seems like an agenda to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. George Hankins.
Good evening, George Hankins, Trapboro. The more I tried to compose a articulate written response, I just thought I'd speak from the heart because that's most the way I work. For 25 years, I've worked in education, and I have one child. She is autistic. She is in middle school East, and everything I say revolves around the conversations I have with her every evening. Over the last couple of years, we've had to have many conversations with my daughter, and we've had to begin to express to her things that are changing in this world. There's a culture and, for lack of better words, things that have happened that I would describe as woke. And what has happened is that my daughter has had to grow up much faster. She doesn't understand things like other kids because she is developmentally delayed and behind many kids in terms of the social emotional. She may do very well academically, and if you look at her IEP, she does not have any of those things in there that may say that she can't be included in every single thing. However, when she's sitting alone at lunch and she has fears about when she has her period and going to the bathroom and kids knocking on the door, she's in the stall, she feels like someone's looking at her or watching her, and all those kind of things complicate every morning before I can get off to work, to school, because my daughter has had school avoidance. The elementary school principal many times when she was in pre-COVID was going out to the car to get my daughter out of the car, to help her let her into school, to encourage her to be there. And certainly things changed as COVID, because certainly we know that the situation was different. And being my daughter received a mass exemption in April of 2020 from her pediatrician from CHOP, there was no discussion. There wasn't a problem because she had specific needs. But when I have to tell my daughter that things that maybe she's taught at school are different than what is being shared with them, and that there's teachers that support Policy 720, and they're openly sharing that it's not that big a deal. To her, I have to tell her that we as a family feel things differently. So my thought I wanted to share is this. I've had to tell my daughter that there could be boys in the bathroom if the policy was to be changed, and certainly that is the possibility. And I'm talking about biological males. I understand people use different nomenclature. What I'm trying to say is that this is a real struggle, and certainly my daughter is already isolated because of her social emotional needs and the fact that she doesn't fit in with many other children. I just want the board to be able to think about this. When we talk about inclusivity and all, my daughter is not part of the all if that's the change. I realize that it may not fit the persona of the person that maybe be the best person to describe this, but I'm trying to speak from the heart. My daughter wants to go to a school in which she can have privacy in a gender-specific bathroom based upon her biological sex. She should, and if I was to request into an IEP that my daughter would have such a exemption made, that she should be in a gender-specific bathroom that is based upon biological sex, it should be able to be put in there. If you're willing to put it in a private conversation between a principal and maybe a school board administration, that a child would be able to visit a bathroom that is not their biological sex. I don't see the difference, and I would ask that you would consider that in your conversations, because this is going back, I'm sure, to policy.
Thank you. We've got Amber Dorr.
Hi, Amber Dorr, Skipback Township. Last week, newly elected President Ms. White and VP Mr. McKinney discussed bringing back civility in these meetings, and we heard it tonight. That was followed by praises from public comments and post-meeting news article. Of course, anyone that knows me, I am all for politeness. Every week when I'm here, I guarantee to be respectful. But I also intend to hold you accountable. It would be irresponsible for me not to point out the fact that those calling for the need for calm and courtesy are the very individuals who created unrest just months ago. But my main point tonight is to discuss last week's meeting, how it started and ended. First, we saw the newly elected PV Ford candidate sworn in and address the community. Then we moved to public comment. We heard over and over from a dozen community members, parents, and students. The overwhelming theme was safety, which we've already heard tonight, for PV students, and the need to create a safe environment. Safety was a word used over and over through tears, fears, and sadness. After public comment came the agenda. Then, approximately 3.5 hours into the meeting, Ms. White made a motion to hold Policy 720. As a quick refresher, we all know Policy 720 is the bathroom policy put in forward motion 2 months ago after the public came out to express their concern, again, for safety of the students in PV bathrooms and locker rooms. Because it was at that time it was discovered that the facilities were open to be used by any sex on any given day. Policy 720, voted on by the previous board, put in place a reasonable, fair, and safe strategy to accommodate the PV student body, stating bathroom and locker room facilities would be assigned based on a student's biological sex. And at the same time, PV would open up additional single-stall bathrooms for students that might not be comfortable. Ms. White and the PV Forward ticket won on a campaign of moving the district forward, but it would seem to be with the motion to hold Policy 720 is in fact moving us backwards, or at least putting us at a standstill. My question, 3.5 hours after becoming the new leader, why pivot on Policy 720 as your first action, especially after hearing students that night with concern on safety here? And after a walkout on September 19th that included over 400 students, which occurred while you were on the board, Ms. White. One characteristic of a strong leader is creating a collaborative culture. As the new leader, Ms. White, and the rest of the board, and you, Dr. Russell, I would say the PV community deserves a clarification on your decision of Policy 720 and holding it, especially after PV students not only demonstrated, but expressed their need for safety, and we hear it again tonight, to feel comfortable coming to learn in these schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Terry Melville.
Good evening, Terry Mulville, Collegeville Borough. Congratulations and welcome to the new board members. And I look forward to the ongoing discussions about policy 720 because my child is being mentally and physically harmed by this policy, and he is losing time from class up to 20 minutes at a time because there's only certain restrooms he is able to use, and he does not feel safe. So I appreciate the viewpoint of all parents. We all want our children to be safe, but my child is not either. So again, thank you, and I look forward to listening to additional commentary on and elimination of policy 720 because it is harming kids. It is harming my child every single day. So I hope this board will continue to focus on the overall issue of safety. I'm a safety professional. That's what I do for a living. I've been in the safety profession for 32 years. And I think there's been way too much time spent by this board talking about bathrooms and books and things that are really not a safety issue, when all along we've all known that there have been violence and bullying issues in the school. And there's a lot that can be done proactively as a culture within the school. And another parent said it, it's not all the school district's responsibility, but there's a lot of proactive things that can be done that I just don't see happening. Immediately following that incident with the fight, that brutal attack on that girl, it just, in my opinion, it just seems like there should have been immediate action, a trauma team brought in to support all students. This was a brutal, heinous attack that people observed, and there was no one there to help coach, counsel the students, the teachers, anybody that saw it. Safety committee, definitely need one. There needs to be more patrolling, hourly patrols of the bathrooms by adults. Maybe have volunteers that are cleared, obviously, with background checks. Recognize kids for good and safe behavior. If they do use the Safe to Say hotline, then recognize them privately and reward them. They need to be, if you want kids to really come to you and tell them, they need to feel safe to be able to do so. Not just having an assembly telling them that they should have done better and stop calling the news and videoing. So there's a lot of things that we can be doing. I'd first start recognizing that particular teacher, whoever that woman was that stood over that girl, she's the first one that needs to be recognized for her integrity and her strength and her courage, because she is the only one that stood up and did anything for that child. Where were the security guards? Where are the police officers? You want to talk about safety? We're sitting futzing around with, bathroom policies, and we've got real danger going on in this building, and we're all lucky that that child wasn't killed last week. She could have been killed. Do y'all hear that? She could have been killed. So let's get down to what really needs to be done. Put some proactive measures in for safety. Make sure my child is safe too. And finally, the op-ed. School board members are not supposed to be contacting the media. So that's just further dividing the community.
That's your 3 minutes, Ms.
Thank
Melville.
you.
Thank you. Next, Kim Mares.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to talk about two things. One, Policy 815, the acceptable use of internet computers and network resources. At last week's work session, that was on the agenda, and now it's off because it's being moved to policy, and I'm not sure I can make the meeting. First, I would like to say I'm thrilled to see PSBA and our administration supporting what is in law, both federally and state, the definitions of child pornography, obscenity, etc. So that is great news for our minor children in the district. I am supportive of this common sense approach that is supported by both federal and state law, which if you refer to the policy, it is in there to protect our children. And this is something that some of us have been asking for a long time. I'm hopeful, as I did see in policy meeting, that adoption of policy 815 will be adopted. I didn't see much pushback at all from most of the board members that were there, and I'm looking forward to seeing policy 815, those parameters and those definitions of obscenity and pornography then applied to policy 109, which is also, as we know, the library books, the books in our library, to protect our minor children. And I have the utmost confidence that our board is able to balance not only policy 815, 109, 720, and all the other issues in the district, because we're all professionals, and I have confidence that you'll be able to handle it all. This has always been about protecting our students. So, and I'm going to segue then into policy 27 when we're talking about protecting our students. We need to keep policy 720 in place. It's a policy that doesn't exclude. It's a policy that allows females to use their own bathrooms, males to use their own bathrooms, and then we have single stalls that are available for anybody who wants to use them. That is what will protect and respect our students. So I am asking and advocating that we do not get rid of policy 720, and especially it's not just bathrooms, but it also entails locker rooms, and that's very concerning. And I know somebody's already said this, but the next step, which I would be incredibly concerned about, is also sports and taking away the rights of females to participate in a sport with other females. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other folks in the audience that would like to go ahead? Just remember to state your name and municipality. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill Hall, and I'm in Collegeville. First of all, thank you to the new school board members and to the old ones, but gosh, folks, you guys have only had 7 days to figure stuff out. I don't know about the rest of the community, but I recognize you need grace and you need a little time to settle into your chairs before you can start changing the world. So as far as I'm concerned, you're heading in the right direction, and thank you for your efforts. I think we all are focused on the safety of our children, and I know that not everyone is an expert on safety. Not everyone has a career in safety. There are people who do. There are people who work with childhood trauma expertise. Is there a reason that anyone can give me on the board that we are not seeking out people with expertise to meet the challenges that our district faces? We can't do it alone, and we shouldn't be trying to do it alone. Why not talk to people who know what they're doing? I also just have to say that when it comes to the policy 720, the fact that we're sending back to policy the question of adding a moment of silence, and 720 hasn't been through the proper policy, come on. I mean, there's a clear need for everybody to work within the proper processes and procedures that are in place. So let's make sure that we do that, send it back, and work it out so that it's something that we can all agree on, or at least accept. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, I'm Heidi Brown. I'm from Lower Frederick Township. So I'm sitting here. I wasn't expecting to speak tonight. I just have to bring to light the hypocrisy that is going on here from the get-go of this meeting. We're all here for the safety of our children. I heard about uniting. I heard about talking about bullying among our children, being role models, bringing the community together. I need to bring to light an Instagram site, Perk Valley Proud. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, okay, but I want to bring it to everybody's attention. It's a site that is set up solely to bully, make fun of, disgrace our school district. It has no community information, no information on students and their achievements or anything positive about our school. It was set up to bully a certain group of people, and the people that are following this site Miss White, Miss Sadler, Todd McKinney, Bob Liggett, correct? You guys are following a hate site and are sitting here talking about how you want to unite the community. Shame on you. I want to defend the attack on our females and stop the bullying. We need to think about the safety in our school, and it starts with you. If you are following sites like that, just set up for hate, what kind of example are you? Running our school, overseeing it, making fun of our superintendent. How dare you? It's disgusting.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Suzanne Bates, Skippack Township. I was not planning on speaking, so deal with my, apologies. Just something, just felt the need that I needed to put this out there. I would just really thank you, board members, for your time in advance. I know it's a volunteer job, and I know it's challenging, and I appreciate the time. However, I would really like you and encourage you to focus on inclusivity by upholding Policy 720. I know it's not perfect, but it does provide protection and boundaries for students. I'm asking the board to respect the voice that has previously spoken from this community, from the students that walk out, from what they feel is going to keep them safe from a majority standpoint. And this policy aligns with what's being taught in our health curriculum starting at the middle school level in terms of what biological sex is. The reality of the situation is there are not going to be biological males in a female bathroom dealing with periods and stuff like that. And I think this policy addresses those concerns and aligns with what's being taught in our curriculum. The reality is inclusivity still needs boundaries, and I think this policy does a very good job doing that. So I would implore you guys to focus back on education and not over spending time trying to change and adjust something that's already in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Judy Lofton from Skippack. First of all, congratulations to the new board members. Very excited to see a group whose mission is trying to help the community heal. So that's really a wonderful thing and something that's needed for our community.
Again, I would appreciate when there
Can you
is
pause
someone
my time, please?
when
Yeah,
there is
while
someone
the
at the
president's
podium
speaking.
speaking. Everyone needs to be equally respected. And so I'm going to ask respectfully that you do that.
Dr. Russell, can you reset her time?
Okay, so to start over, Judy Lofton from Skippack. And so congratulations to our new board members. And I know, as one of our earlier speakers said, there's a lot to take in as a new board member. I wanted to make sure everyone on the board is familiar with Policy 832. Policy 832 is the educational equity policy, and this was implemented in 2020, and it went through extensive review in 2022, and the board voted in 2022 to keep the policy in its entirety. This policy says this board adopts this policy to prioritize the principle of educational equity through fair and just allocation of resources, opportunities, and treatments of students based on each individual student's needs. If you move down to where it talks about barriers, barriers shall mean factors that block or hinder movement or progression. Barriers to educational equity may include, but are not limited to, policies, administrative regulations and practices, explicit and implicit biases, facilities, budgeted funds, curriculum and instruction, personnel, class size, code of conduct, and school climate. If you scroll on down to where we talk about the authority in this policy, it says the board is committed to the provision of an equitable education system that reflects the principles of fairness and justice for all students, regardless of gender. And I'll stop there, and I'm going to go and share the definition of gender in this policy. Gender shall mean the range of characteristics pertaining to and differentiating between masculinity and femininity, including a person's gender identity and gender expression, which includes a person's internal sense of being male, female, some combination of male and female, or neither male nor female. And then if you go down into the guidelines section, it says educational equity shall serve as the foundational structure upon which all aspects of the district's educational system are built and maintained. Now, I think when you look at this, you can see that policy 720, which was very recently implemented, is in direct violation of policy 832. And so my recommendation to the board is that while policy 720 goes back to policy, if it goes back to policy committee for review, that exceptions be made to that policy so that the administration is able to comply with both policies that are on the books. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Gosh, a lot going on here. Hi, Tara Chilla from Skip Back. I just wanted to come in support of the policy 720. I live in a neighborhood of about 10 to 20 families. We have Christmas parties, we get together, we do sports, we talk all the time. We have a ton of kids, ranging from newborn babies all the way up to college. And I just want to remind you that there are little ones. There's little ones in elementary school. Where does this policy start? What about the kids in elementary school? What about the parents that I'm talking to about with preschoolers that are asking, hey, how's Perk Valley? My first answer, amazing. Love it. Teachers are great. My kids just play sports. They love it. There's nothing bad about it. But there's this new policy that's, they're fighting for it. We got it. But now they're trying to take it away. That, telling you that your boy is going to have a girl in the bathroom or vice versa. And the first thing that I'm hearing is, all right, who's homeschooling? So a lot of people are talking about not coming to this school district. Education's great, things are great, but you know what? They don't want to deal with that. They don't want little kids have to worry about which bathroom to go in. They're already trying to figure out if they're a boy or a girl and what to wear to school and what to say to kids. And I just want to remind you guys that there are little kids involved. Everybody's talking about the high school, but don't forget the middle school, the elementary schools, the parents that are deciding whether or not they should come here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Lisa McHale, Perk Township. I agree the youth of our community and in this school district need the truth. The Merriam-Webster definition of truth is that which is in accordance with facts and reality. For most, a common sense definition of truth is providing nothing other than honest and hard facts. Grown adults can't continue to coddle students based on their emotions and the feelings they have instead of actual truth. This issue is directly contributing to the district's decline. From an anything goes bathroom policy to an X-rated library book collection and to the vicious and under-addressed assaults in the hallways of the high school, PV School District is becoming less and less desirable for a place that parents can trust for their children's education. Kids tend to feel safe and secure when they are guided by adults that have a solid moral foundation, an unwavering, decisive response to violence related to bullying, issues involving gender dysphoria, or inappropriate bathroom use, etc. Children must be surrounded by adults who use common sense solutions, who rely solely on black and white factual evidence, not faux science. Clear boundaries must be set in place along with established consequences for choices made. As it stands, lies and deception are being force-fed to our children. It's gut-wrenching to watch these kids, whose minds aren't even fully developed in the first place, become so confused and dissatisfied with how they were created and who they were meant to be. Not to distract from the original well intent of SEL, no amount of SEL or social emotional learning or DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, will solve these issues. Both of these ideologies are outcome-based policies, purely focused on self-centered emotion, vanity, and feelings. The failed outcomes of these programs, as we can clearly see over and over again, prove once again to be a complete disregard for logic and reality in order to justify an inner turmoil and a sense of self-uncertainty. So far, the outcome of SEL and DEI has demonstrated that emotion wins over logic and that imagination will always win over reality, and this is truly tragic. Going forward, parents and students and community members should expect nothing less than a clear and decisive vision for healing in our community, in our schools, and for our students. As a concerned community member, I am strongly advocating that any school policy developed through the lens of prejudice, motivated by pride and vanity, be abolished by this school board starting tonight. Many like-minded, common-sense members of this community are here tonight to say that putting a hold on Policy 720 will only move the district into a backwards trajectory rather than moving it forward. Sadly, it will only cause further problems with safety issues for girls in particular and further divide the community.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else?
Thank you. As I was not at the last meeting.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I thought you were pointing to me.
Well, if you'd like to say something.
No,
you can
no,
be
it's
up
all
next.
him. I thought you were pointing to me.
Tim Jagger, Lower Frederick. A lot of things I have to say were already said, but I have not a problem reiterating them. Last week, I was at the meeting. I listened to the heart-wrenching cries and pleas for safety and security from students and community members. And I thought that everybody was in agreement that safety needs to be a top priority. And then after a majority of the people had left and the meeting was winding down, I hear Laura announce she wants to deactivate Policy 720 and put it back to the Policy Committee for discussion. Policy 720, a policy that upholds the sanctity, safety, and security of the facilities for biological sex so that children can use the bathroom without fear of someone of the opposite sex walking in while they're using the facilities. How is deactivating that policy enhancing student safety and security? How is allowing anyone to use any facility they want not a safety concern? After all the cries for safety last week, along with the hundreds of students that walked out in favor of a bathroom policy, how can you possibly think you're sitting there looking out for the best interest of the students if you vote to deactivate a policy put in place for student safety? I'm wondering, have you even reached out to the students for their opinion? And if yes, I'm curious of how many of the thousands of students have you actually talked to? In my opinion, deactivating this policy is acting in complete ignorance and does not take student safety into consideration. I'd also like to add, that moment of silence, you're in America. Stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Kenworthy. You're good? I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. Is there anyone else? Go ahead, sir.
Marshall Stommel, Trapboro. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Russell for her service and her calm and thoughtful handling of the situation. I've seen a lot of the chatter on a lot of the board websites and all that. I'd like to welcome the new board. I served on Trapboro Council, so I know what you guys are dealing with. It's not easy. There's a lot of finger pointing, a lot of that. Anyway, and I see both sides of this. I had nothing to say about 720, but I think 720 should be retained. When I served on Borough Council, obviously I was a Republican, but I see both sides of this. I think a lot of this, the safety issues, a lot of questions. There are questions whether the male security people could interact with females that were fighting. I believe they can, but a lot of people don't think they could. I commend the teacher who did jump in, or the counselor who did jump in. And I wrote down, just right before I came here, 3 letters, ART, accountability. Like I said, there's a lot of finger pointing, and there's no fear of consequences for the attackers. What are we going to do to those attackers? I know they got the 10-day suspension, but in my view, from what I've heard and what I've seen, they should be expelled. The respect for one another. Even here and anywhere in politics or in our world, there's no respect for, they're scoffing when people are up here. saying things that are not what we, if we believe the other way, we're scoffing. Again, we got to unite and work together. And tolerance. As long as nobody is actually harmed and their safety is in danger, we should tolerate their views. But there's a lot of different cultures that people come from, and as Mr. McKinney said earlier, it's all about the kids. That's what we're here for. What the situation or the way we treat the kids or the way we want to make them safe, it's all about them. And there's all of this is the responsibility of everybody here, but it's more the responsibility of what we're taught at home. And I think everybody here who is a parent needs to take a look in the mirror and say, I don't know these two girls from Adam or Eve, but that did the assault, but those parents need to be held accountable.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports and presentations. 2.01 is the student liaisons report.
There we go. All right. As I was not at the last meeting, I was attending my end of the year football banquet, which was really fun. I just want to express my gratitude to our new members for getting voted into the school board, and I'm looking forward to doing great things for our students and community. We just have a few things in regards to the students. Academics, literature keystones today and tomorrow. Keystone retakes are Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Moving on to athletics, our winter athletes are continuing to work hard. Events this week include girls and boys basketball games on Wednesday and Friday, girls and boys swim meet tomorrow, girls and boys wrestling matches on Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday, and a unified bocce meet on Thursday. We would also like to encourage you all to support our musicians at Perk Valley. Tonight there's a concert at Middle School West at 7:30, so after the school board meeting is over, we'd love to see some of you there supporting them. And our high school winter concert is this Thursday the 14th at 7:30 at Middle School East. And finally, winter break for all students in the district is December 25th through January 1st. We wish everyone a happy holidays and a happy new year.
Thank you so much. Item 2.02 is the President's report. I have just one thing to say with regards to the holiday shop that Power Packs hosted for the school district. 230 children in our school district are now going to receive at least 3 gifts this holiday season. So I just want to acknowledge that, the work of all of the folks that volunteered and all of the folks that donated, because the holiday was made much nicer because of all of you. And that ends my report. .03 is the superintendent's report. Dr. Russell.
I have nothing to report this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. 2.04 solicitor's report.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Subers. 2.05 board and district committee reports. Does anyone have anything on that? We haven't had any, right? So I think we're good there. And that brings us to section 3, consent agenda. 3.01 is the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Of amendment.
I didn't hear you.
I have an amendment.
Okay, Mr. Saylor?
I'd like to request 4.03 be removed from consent.
There's a request for 4.03 to be removed from consent.
I think our policy is that any board member can request to have an item removed from the consent agenda, so a formal motion isn't necessary. So I think it would be appropriate to move forward. I'm not sure if there was a second yet, but to move forward with a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 4.03.
Okay, and then I've actually, in tandem with that, I would like to remove 9.07.
I didn't hear a second to the motion, so I would like to second that.
So we would be requesting a revised motion, and the motion would be to approve the consent agenda with the exceptions of items 4.03 and 9.07.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it. Section 4, Mr. Fountain, Education.
Nothing to add, and recommend that it be adopted as presented.
Four point oh two stays. That's the
4.02 is the motion to approve high school program planning guide changes as presented. Is there discussion?
Are you making a motion?
No, just is there discussion?
You need to, it's a motion. They're looking for a motion, so we need to make a motion, have a second, and then we would open it up for discussion.
Can I make a motion to approve high school program planning?
Oh, we can't hear him.
Is your microphone on?
I thought it was on. Sorry about that. Make a motion to approve high school program planning guide changes as presented, and I so move.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or discussion?
I have a discussion. So over the weekend, we were given some information to read, which would go into the theoretical process of convincing the board to approve the high school planning program guide. One of the 4 documents caught my attention, specifically the document that talked about adding critical race theory as an important issue in today's education. It caught my eye because when I ran a couple years ago, I ran concerned about the thought process of critical race theory being vetted into our processes when we develop programs and curriculum. So I wanted to, ask some questions on why specifically that was used as a document for school board members to read to help push them in convincing them to adopt the program guide or understanding the process of going from 4 tracks to 3 tracks. I get concerned when I read things that say, Keynesian style democracy is no longer a valid and viable option for the United States and needs to be changed in our education process. When those things pop into my email in terms of voting in the positive nature for a program guide, that makes me think that those types of articles is what our administration is reading when they're developing their guides. So you sent 4 documents. 3 of them I thought were really interesting. One of them dramatically caught my eye, and I was just curious about what DSC and CRT, that paper, what your thought process on how that paper reflects what you and the administration does in developing program guides.
Well, I appreciate that you read the papers, Mr. Saylor. Thank you.
I read everything given to me.
And I always appreciate that very much. The intent with sharing those papers was not really to bring attention to CRT or to indicate that there's any sort of initiative that would be perceived or leave the impression of anything negative. All 4 papers talk about that one in particular, more so social justice, and uses that phrase. But the other papers talk about access for students and considering the barriers that have sometimes been in front of students that really preclude them from accessing rigorous curriculum when in most cases they're ready for that. That paper went in a slightly different direction, and those are some of the topics it went into are much deeper and beyond where we are as a school district. In all honesty, the general idea that we afford our students the opportunities, that we are just in what we afford them, there's educational equity, is really what the idea was. But I do recognize and understand why you would call out those differences. They were pretty significantly different in some of the comments made by the author and the research team to those other 3. But the district is not necessarily promoting those things. Really, the message was we need to make sure we're providing access to our students.
Do you believe that critical race theory is the most important issue facing education for Perkiomen Valley?
I do not.
Okay, because that's what the paper talked about.
I don't agree with that for Perkiomen Valley, though.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, I guess we would do, we had a motion and a second, so we can vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, Motion passes.
And if I could, Ms. White, I really do appreciate the questions that were posed and the conversation that was prompted. I do think it was supported by some of the revisions that were presented tonight, so thank you for approving that tonight.
And just for the record, for some of the new board members, I sent all my questions to Ms. White and Dr. Russell prior to the meeting.
Mr. Fountain?
4.03 has been taken off of consent. 4.04, 5, and 6
You gotta
are-
do 4.03. You gotta make a
4.03.
motion for it, yeah.
Motion to approve 2024 school calendar as presented, and I so move.
Discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Saylor. Discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to get some clarification on the information that was placed in the memo to us over the weekend about our calendar and what would be presented on our school website. It stated that we will include Indigenous Peoples Day holiday on the list of holidays and celebrations posted on our website. Looking at the presentation of the calendar, we have federal holidays, religious holidays, and one special proclamation. We are elected leaders in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which does not currently recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, but it does recognize Lincoln's birthday, Good Friday, and Flag Day, which are not shown on our calendar. What is the importance of showing Indigenous Peoples Day over the 50 other presidential proclamations? And I wanted to briefly read an additional proclamation from President Biden, which is Patriots Day, which is to be celebrated on September 11th. He states, "Today we remember all the heroes who forged in the hours, days, and years that followed the terrible morning of September 11th, 2001. Ordinary Americans, amidst the terror, smoke, and flames, demonstrated extraordinary courage and selflessness. Together, their bravery helped prove to our nation and to the world that those terrorists most hoped to wound could not be broken, the character of this nation. Now, therefore, I, Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America, do hereby proclaim September 11th, 2023 as Patriot Day and National Day of Service and Remembrance. I call upon all departments and agencies and instruments of the United States to display the flag of the United States at half-staff on Patriot Day. I invite the governors of the United States and its territories and interested organizations and individuals to join in this observance." So my question would be, why are we picking one presidential proclamation, Indigenous Peoples Day, over any other, more specifically Patriots Day?
So just to clarify for the record, that holiday is not recognized as a holiday on the current draft of the calendar.
But it will
It's
be on
an
our website.
Right, it is in a list. And the very points you're raising are the reason we created the list, so that we are not leaving things out, but that we are trying to recognize the many celebrations and holidays that exist. We can't capture them all on the calendar, but we would like to capture as many as possible on this list and recognize them. So your points are well taken, and we would be happy to include those on that list, because there's no reason we wouldn't want to recognize those.
So, so for instance, we have all the federal holidays: Independence Day, Labor Day, Yom Kippur, excuse me, that's a religious holiday, Veterans Day, federal holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, Martin Luther King's Day, President's Day, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, Independence, and Columbus Day, all federal holidays. We have some religious holidays: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Diwali, Eid, Christmas, Easter. But why add one proclamation? Why not just remove it? Because you're not going to list all 57, are you?
We could. We absolutely could. And honestly, there's no intention of being unfair or disrespectful to any proclamation that's been made. So we would be happy to include those. I think it's a reasonable point that you've raised, and we hadn't thought about it before. Happy to put them on. I'm pointing to Dr. Parr. We'll work on that together, and happy to do that.
Okay.
Is there any other?
One of the things I'd like to point out that Mr. Saylor raises is the federal government recognizes Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day. So I think that is a just compromise for those who look to celebrate either one of those aspects of that day.
Well, there are two proclamations for that day. One is a federal holiday, as assigned by the legislature of the federal government, and one is a presidential proclamation for the same day.
But what I'm saying is there is a recognition of both. So
recognition of Patriots Day. There's a recognition of veterans who are MIA. There are 57 proclamations.
And as Dr. Russell has stated, we should recognize all of them.
Are there any other points to be made? Seeing none, there was a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
Moving on to 4.04 and 4.05 and 4.06, they are all on consent. December the 4th, we talked about the enrollment report. That concludes my section.
Thank you, Mr. Fountain. Mr. Saylor, business.
Thank you. Mr. Reaver, do you have anything to add?
The only thing to add is recognition of 5.09, which is the approval of the Act 1 resolution that was discussed last week.
Great, thank you very much. 5.02 has been removed. 5.03, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are all 5.3 to 5.7 are all on consent. 5.08 is a reports, grants, and donations for the board and community to review. 5.09 is a new item, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions or conversation? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. And that ends section 5. Section 6, payment of bills, Mr. Saylor.
Thank you. 6.01 and 6.02, ratification of bills and payment, and also the approval of the treasury report and financial statements, and I so move.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, motion passes. And that ends. What did we miss? All in favor? I'm so sorry.
Aye.
Against? Motion passes.
So ends my sections.
Thank you, Mr. Saylor. 7, professional personnel, Dr. Weston.
Thank you. Item 7.01, the acceptance of resignations and retirements. There are no resignations or retirements for December. Items 7.02 through 7.07 are all on consent, and that ends section 7.
Thank you, Dr. Weston. Section 8, support personnel, Mr. Keenan.
Section 8. There are no resignations under 8.01. 8.02, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all on consent, and that ends my section.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Section 9 is governance. 9.01 is the first reading on policies as presented. Is there any additional conversation about that? Seeing none, I can move those to second read. 9.02 is the approval to hold a second reading and adopt policies as presented. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Seeing a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Against? Motion passes. 9.03 is the appointment to North Monco Technical Career Center, JOC. It's the request to appoint Mr. Todd McKinney to the NMTCC JOC to represent Perkiomen Valley School District to finish a 3-year term through December 2025, replacing Mrs. Mayers.
I so move.
And a second? Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Congratulations, Mr. McKinney. Thank you very much for offering to sit as appointed on that panel. 9.04 is a request to approve the appointment of Dr. Wade Weston as the Perkiomen Valley School District representative for the Education Foundation Board, replacing Dr. Rena Kolar, effective immediately. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Against? Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Weston. Okay, 5, 6, and 7. 5 and 6, rather, they're on consent. 7 I had asked to remove from consent because I would like to table 9.07 until January so that we can have appropriate thoughtful reflection with regards to exactly what the commitment of principles of government mean to us, each of us as elected school board members. So if we could table that, we can have further, more robust discussion in January.
Is there a motion to table?
Motion to table 9.07 until January.
Is there a second? All in favor? Against? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. And then we have two discussion items, 9.08 and 9.09. 9.08 is the board appointments to committees. I've heard from almost everybody with regards to first, second, third preferences for committees, but I have not heard from everybody. So I am actually going to hold off on presenting the board appointments for committees until I hear from everybody. I'm asking for a response, final response by Friday, December 29th, by the end of the day. That way it can be reviewed in agenda planning on Tuesday, 1/2, and it can be part of the draft agenda on January 3rd. So the discussion item 9.09, that's the review of the board goals. Again, I would like to do that, have that discussion, hold that discussion in January in conjunction with the commitment of principles of governance. And 9.10 is the new item that was added. It's the request to make a motion with regards to the deactivation of policy 720. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to deactivate policy 720.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Dr. Weston? Okay. Is there any conversation or discussion?
Yes. The policy 720, as it was rewritten, was intended to address all students. Those opting to use a single stall for whatever reason or issue they may choose to, and the remaining restrooms for biological males or biological females. What is the issue with it, and why are you wanting to change it? In fact, I would also ask if you might want to even read the policy aloud here to indicate where you find the issues in it. That being said, this issue has been one of the most contested and divisive issues we have faced. It was developed to provide an immediate response to one of the most volatile periods we've seen. To merely repeal it would put us right back in the situation we were trying to diffuse. If you see something wrong with the policy, I would first ask that you explain what your issues are with it, and secondly, refer back to policy if you feel it needs to be revised in some way, not to deactivate it now. Simply doing away with it would seem to be asking for seriously negative fallout.
Thank you for the statement, Mr. Fountain. Is there other discussion, Mr. Liggett?
Yes. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Fountain. I appreciate your words there and your cautious attitude towards this. I think that's a wise way to look at this. We need to look at the implications of either passing or repealing a policy. And I guess I'm curious about from administration, because if we were to repeal or deactivate, regardless of what nomenclature we use to do that, does that present an issue for administration, for the principals? How prepared are you if we take this policy and just toss it right now? Go ahead.
Well, I think administration is concerned about the potential disruption that moving through a process in this proposed manner also brings. Now, I want to go back to initially, administration did not agree this policy was necessary. I understand that there are individuals here tonight and within our community that do. I don't appreciate the way the policy was initially implemented. I don't support that. What I do support is moving policy through policy committee, where there is opportunity for dialogue and healthy debate and really to understand more deeply the views of individuals, in this case on both sides of the issue. So is administration worried? Yes, we are worried about the disruption that it would cause. Am I worried about the students that have been impacted? Yes, I'm also worried about the students that have been impacted. It is a really difficult situation. If the board moves tonight to deactivate the policy, I look forward to conversation. That's what we need to have. We need to have conversation. And before this policy was implemented, we really didn't have that conversation in the typical manner that we do.
I was just wondering if I could follow up on that. The words that you say about how this policy was initially passed and about how you didn't support the process that did that, that really rings true to me in the fact that the policy committee had no opinion on this, and typically discussion of policy is something that isn't handled at just this level. It's community input, it's the policy committee as a whole that does that, and in my humble opinion, I think that that's a wise way to go, because when we have the policy committee weigh in on an issue, whether it would be to remove or to pass an issue, I think having that many voices and heads together allows us to, at the other end of that, vote on a policy that can perhaps reflect better the community and its opinion, and at least no one will feel left out of the conversation. So I think regardless of how this ends up, I think it going to the committee is an important step in this. And in respect for what you were saying about how you would have to adjust to this, right now we're living under policy 720. The next policy committee meeting, I believe, is in January. So at that meeting, that gives us a month to discuss amongst ourselves, the community to have a conversation, and for the administration to be prepared if we decide in February another way to go. Does that sound reasonable, Dr. Russell?
Absolutely, yes, yes. We will be prepared to discuss. We will be prepared with some really responses to some of the comments that we've heard over time, particularly in response to the considerations around safety, as we unpack that and think about how we do the best that we can. We can't ensure safety. We can never be 100% certain, but we can do everything in our power, within our means, to decrease the likelihood of a negative incident or an unsafe incident.
Well, that's the thing, the safety issue about this. Apparently, we've had obviously the fighting incident that happened previously, and we have this, and these issues are getting intertwined in the conversations, which is understandable because safety is the most important thing that we have to concern ourselves with. And so I'm not trying to decouple one from the other here, but if waiting till January is something which allows us to present perhaps more of a package and figure out in a more complete and holistic way how to move forward, I'm in favor of moving in that direction. And I'm sorry, Dr. Weston, I didn't mean to take all your time.
You're completing your thought and you're completing your presentation. I think I've made no secret of how I feel about policy 720 in the discussions that have taken place over the last.
Is your mic on?
Yes, it is. Okay. Can you all hear me? Okay. Okay. Yeah, like I say, there's no secret about how I feel about this policy. It seemed to come out of nowhere. Was introduced at a board meeting. It's, in my opinion, unnecessary, unenforceable, possibly illegal. There's a lot of opinions floating back and forth around that, and it just there was no safety concern that was ever demonstrated to me that made it necessary to have this policy in place. At the same time, I appreciate what Dr. Russell's saying, and I'm not sure I'm a big fan of, just flipping back and forth with each new board majority, going from one thing to another based on whoever's in the driver's seat at the time, or whoever has the votes at the time. I agree with Mr. Liggett that what we need here is opportunity for discussion, and really heartfelt discussion about what we need here, what the situation is, how we best need to address the situations, and what I would prefer to, what I would like very much to see, rather than just a policy focused specifically on bathroom use, I would like to see a policy developed that actually addresses transgender student issues in a more broad sense. There are a number of districts around us that have transgender students policies in place. I would like to look at what these districts are doing and put something in place here that really addresses that recognizes the needs of the transgender community here, recognizes them as you know, fellow community members and students who have rights that need to be addressed and protected, and just, you know, put something a little bit broader in place that really supports our entire community. That's what I'd like to see going forward. So yeah, I want to see this coming. I want to, whatever we do, decide with it, keep it, deactivate it. It needs to come back to policy, and we need to move policies forward.
Discussion?
Thank you, Dr. Weston. Thank you, Dr. Weston. Is there any further discussion? I saw that your hand was poised, but if Dr. Campley would like to go first.
So I have a few things that have been on my mind, hearing different things that have been said. I definitely agree with Mr. Liggett and Dr. Weston. I know I've reached out to you, Dr. Russell, and said I think that we really do need to have a focus group with that focuses on LGBTQ community, and helping to kind of develop and kind of look at transgender policy. I think is a great idea, and something I think that we should focus on. I also, again, go back to the idea of task force and looking at bullying and safety, and I think all of those things need to occur, but I don't think that by having policy 720, it's going to make the bathrooms safer. As you had said, Dr. Russell, prior to 720, there were no incidences of situations that were unsafe due to a transgender individual using the bathroom of the gender that they associate with. And while, yes, I agree there are issues in the bathrooms, bullying, drug use, those things that I think need to be addressed. I know I've given some recommendations of things that could potentially be done. Allowing a student from a marginalized group to use the bathroom to which they identify with is not something that is going to make the bathroom safer if they don't have that access. I think, if anything, continuing to have a policy of 720 continue while we figure out how to make these things safer continues the trauma that these students have endured. These children need to feel safe and supported in order to learn. And right now they feel let down by administration, the teachers in the community. They feel that they don't have a safe place to go to school with 720 in place. And I think they need to have that restored. And we have students who are seniors, and this should be a time that they're enjoying, not fearing. And if we can give some of that back to them, even as sooner the better. And at the same time, while they get that time given back to them, we also need to do the hard work and get these groups up and running, these task force and focus groups, and this needs to happen. This can't be us constantly talking about how bullying's an issue, drug use is an issue, and then 2 years go by and it's still an issue. We really need to see the hard work occurring and looking at the proactive measures. So I would really like to see policy 720 deactivated this evening, and I would like to see some hardcore policies. Bullying, I know one of the community members mentioned the bullying policy. I want to see these policies really looked at, developed, as well as curriculum and some task force. Thank you.
Did you have something?
Yes, the only thing I would like to just add is we've heard a lot from all members of the community, and depending on who you're speaking with, the word safety is used in a way that denotes that just it refers to them. Our underrepresented populations are dealing with it in another way, and I think we need to find a way that incorporates a conversation that includes all students. We cannot just look at it as an either or. Like, it has to be something that, again, we have students who are not attending this school because they do not feel safe because they are transgendered or LGBT. That is a shame and that unfortunately is a stain on this district, that we cannot support those students. And they may be underrepresented, it may be a small number or whatever, but it still matters. And I think, unfortunately, folks come and they use words that evoke a sense of the other and fear. We've never had an incident. We had a policy put in place, that was, looking for a solution. I mean, like, it was a problem that didn't exist. The statistical likelihood of any student coming in contact with a trans student in the bathroom is minuscule. But it was painted as if every day you were going to run into somebody in the bathroom who was going to make you feel uncomfortable. And that's unfortunate, because those students do not need to be marginalized or maligned in such a way that makes them feel any less human being than anyone else. So again, we have to figure out a way to support all of our students. And that's beholden on us or whatever. So we've got to come together and we got to figure this out, folks. We can't be, like Dr. Weston said, this can't be every time the board flips, the policy changes. And that's the unfortunate thing, 'cause that's where we're at. So.
If I may clarify one thing. This policy, as rewritten, never said anything specific to the LGBTQ community at all. It was, in fact, addressing the needs of all students. There are far more students than just the LGBTQ community that feel as if they are not comfortable in a big bathroom. That is addressed or being addressed in this policy as well. They have the opportunity, all students have that opportunity to use a single stall bathroom if they choose, regardless of what their reasoning for that might be. That was the reason that we had said it like that. It is not an LGBTQ issue.
But Mr. Fountain, it affects the LGBT community.
It affects
disproportionately.
all the
Mr. Fountain, if it was stated the way that I think you're intending it to be or whatever, then any student could use those bathrooms, even those who have biological sex but when you say, there's single stall bathrooms, the implication is that if you are trans or gay, those bathrooms are for you.
But that is not what it says.
But it implies that, and that's the thing about it. So to place an undue
I'm just going to ask for the audience to not comment within the dialogue that's going on within the board. If you feel as though you need to talk about something that's happening inside the board discussion, I invite you to go out into the lobby to do so, but unfortunately, this is the time for the board to deliberate and discuss.
Oh, thank you, Ms. White. And Mr. Fountain, I think we do have some areas that we agree upon, but I think the way the policy is written, it places an undue responsibility on those who tend to be the most in danger in our society.
So what about with the parent that we just heard from earlier, that her child is afraid to go to school, who is not in an LGBTQ community, but afraid to go to school for fear that there may be someone of an opposite sex in that bathroom, that we just heard this evening?
And that's unfortunate, but we also heard that there is a student here.
Again, listen, respectfully, if you could please, if you feel like you have comments that you need to make, you're welcome to make them at the end of the meeting. If you would like to discuss what's happening right now during the meeting, I invite you to go to the lobby to do so. But when the board is talking back and forth to one another and there are comments in the audience underlying, and I saw it last week as well, it's just inappropriate with regards to how the discussion takes place during the board meeting. Mr. McKinney, go ahead.
And Mr. Fountain, I truly appreciate your sentiments, and I appreciate having this conversation with you. And I look forward to further conversations with you, whatever. But I think, again, we've also heard from families, too, that have felt the other way, that, again, they have felt maligned and disenfranchised. So I think we have to figure out, again, how this works for all students, So in my disagreement with you, I'm looking for common ground of how to support all students, whatever. So, but I think the way, and this is my perception of how the policy is written, I think it does not support all students. And and again, I do think that it does come at it from the LGBT community being the ones who have the responsibility, who bear the responsibility of having to uphold this policy. So, and that's just what I'm saying. So, but again, I look forward to further conversation.
So to speak to that, Mr. Fountain, your point about whether, to go line by line as to what items within the policy I had issue with. My issue with this policy is well documented, and we sat in several policy meetings running where I was really looking to make a robust safety policy with regards to the bathrooms. And you and I had a conversation about that, and we had that at not only the policy level in several meetings, but also at the board level. So again, to reiterate Dr. Campley's point, Mr. McKinney's point, the issues that I have with 720 is that the discussion that had happened at the policy level, the little discussion that there was, it was independent of the way that this policy was presented and then approved. And so what I would like to do, and with my intention of presenting it last week for suspension, unfortunately, you can't just randomly choose where you want to present things for suspension. So, it appeared last week where it did because of the section that it was in, and that was unfortunately 10:30, and I apologize for that, but the agenda is what it is when you have committees of the whole. We had a very robust education committee, a finance report, which was captivating, Mr. Weaver. And so, at the point that was appropriate to add, that's when it got added to the agenda. And I know that, as board members, we understand the process and procedure with that. But just for some context, it's nothing new that I don't feel like this policy did the job that you're intending it to do. And I feel like it should be discussed, created in a more robust manner with input and guidance from administration. They never had input or the ability to create additional layers to encapsulate the true issues within the bathroom with regards to safety. And with regards to safety specifically, the issue that happened here at the high school, which was unfortunate, had absolutely nothing to do with bathrooms. So this dialogue, it's not an either or. It's not an and but. There are multiple issues at play here. Culture clearly is one of them. But to minimize the safety issue that occurred several weeks ago at this point at the high school and use 720 or any bathroom policy to say that is going to somehow would have prevented what happened is irrelevant. It just makes no sense. And I know that that's not what you're saying, but just to clarify, safety is an issue. But with regards to this policy doesn't address enough safety issues with regards to the bathrooms, because this doesn't address the things that are actually happening in the bathrooms, in my view. And I voiced that during policy committee and during board meetings.
So would it not make a better recommendation, as Mr. Liggett had said a while ago, to take it back to committee, discuss it in committee, but not necessarily deactivate it at this point in time so that there's nothing between now and the next 2 months?
And so my response to that, Mr. Fountain, is that I did request for it to go back to committee because I actually asked for administration to bring additional policy recommendations to committee to have conversation in tandem with that. My view in getting back to the proper process and procedure is that this policy never should have been approved as it stands, and so it's my way of rewinding the clock and hitting reset. Dr. Campley.
So just to kind of go back to some of the things that you said, because I do appreciate where you're saying, like, all students should have access to, everyone has access to the individual stalls, and by doing this, everyone can use either the regular gen ed bathrooms, or they can use the single stall. I can appreciate that. The problem is that there are not enough individual stalls for the amount of students that would perhaps need to use them, and they're not as accessible as we would like to think. Because while we're thinking of this a lot of times from the high school point of view, we have students who are at the elementary level who are transgender individuals who need access to a bathroom. And when we have a policy such as 720 written the way that it is, we are potentially at any moment outing a student that nobody in the community even knows that the child is biologically a different sex. But because of the way this policy is written, they now have to use a different bathroom. And at the elementary level, it's not like they can just leave and go use the single stall bathroom that is right there. It's the accessibility is very different at elementary level. It's different at middle school level, and it's different at high school level. And I think it needs to go back. I like the idea of the reset, and we really need to think this through clearly so that there is not further marginalization of a group. There was no issues prior. The only thing that started this concern was because someone thought they may have seen a boy in a girl's bathroom. There's no actual proof that it was a boy. It could have been a girl who happened to have short hair and was wearing athletic clothing and doesn't follow the stereotypical look of what a female is quote unquote supposed to look like. And that's not okay. And it's not okay for people to feel like they're being pointed out and questioned based on how they look about what bathroom they're using. It further marginalizes a group of individuals that are already the target of such hate and cruelty. They don't need it. They don't need to have any more trauma. And we don't need to perpetuate that. When it was not an issue before, we need to take away 720. We need to go to policy, and we really need to work together to come up with policy that supports our transgender and LGBTQ youth to make sure that they are safe and supported. And we also need to look at our safety protocols and make sure that we are working to support PV from bullying, drug use, and getting a lot of proactive measures in place so that we are not getting to the point that we need to worry about where was security and why wasn't a trauma team brought in. Because that should be the last resort, the last thing we're talking about. We should be talking about what are the protective layers that we're putting in place first.
Is there additional? Mr. Saylor.
Thank you. Just note that I did send my questions in advance, but before I ask my questions, I just wanted to read a statement. Being male or being female is a developmental process. Differences between males and females are widely represented in nature. There are gender differences in phenotypes, personality traits, behaviors, and interests, cognitive performances, and pronences to specific diseases. We've talked about Title IX in this room before. Title IX is a federal law that was passed in 1972 to ensure that male and female students and employees in educational settings are treated equally and fairly. The reason for this is because females in the educational setting were being discriminated against. Barbara Winslow, who is an historian and former teacher at Brooklyn College, eloquently described what life was like for young women before Title IX. Young women were not admitted into many colleges and universities. Athletic scholarships for women were rare. Math and science was a realm reserved for the boys. Girls square danced instead of playing sports, studied home economics instead of training for male-oriented and higher-paying trades. Girls could become teachers and nurses, but they weren't doctors or principals. Women rarely were awarded tenure and even more rarely appointed to college presidents. There was no such thing as sexual harassment because the boys were just being boys. And after all, if a student got pregnant, her formal education has ended. Graduate performance and professional schools openly discriminated against women. As we debate the use of our locker rooms and bathrooms, we are also debating the issues of sports and our school district, regardless if we want to admit this or not. We are focusing on empathy and emotional support, which I appreciate, rather than doing our job, which is, as elected leaders, is to actually lead our school district forward. What will our school district look like 5 years from now? Will male students who identify as female be able to run on the girls' cross-country team? What message then are we sending our student body? We're going to be sending a message of empathetic nature, but also sending a message of discrimination to our female students. We know from science that men are stronger and faster for the most part than women. This is creating an unequal playing field. During a very interesting debate in 2022 at UC Berkeley, a molecular geneticists stated that women currently have internalized misogyny to the point where the man's comfort takes precedence over the woman's safety. This is the most insane thing that has happened in her lifetime, the woman stated. As a public school, we're being tasked to educate our student body. We're not educating our student body that there are more than two genders, so we shouldn't alter policy that allows just for that. Dr. Russell, does the administration agree that today the policy should be deactivated?
So, as I've mentioned, I would prefer policy goes back to committee and that we follow the process. The problem with this policy, it's unique because, first of all, it was implemented in a way that didn't follow that process, and there wasn't the conversation. And right now, it actually could be considered to be violating Policy 103 and the non-discrimination of select groups that have been called out in that policy, as well as 832, depending upon how you read that. 103 is clearer, in my view. So while I'm an advocate for the process, I am also empathetic to the families who right now are really struggling because of this.
So do you agree that the policy should be deactivated tonight, yes or no? Well, let's assume that policy is deactivated tonight. Let's just assume that. I received an email a couple of weeks ago from a former student at Perkins Valley who's not trans.
Yeah.
The student was gay. He was given access to locker rooms and bathrooms that made him feel comfortable. Do you agree with that philosophy for the school district?
You know, I think we need to talk through all of that. Locker rooms are different than restrooms in my view.
Policy
Sports
is about locker
different.
rooms.
It's about restrooms and locker rooms, but we didn't have input on that. It was presented to us and it was approved.
Correct.
If we had had input, we would have talked through and unpacked what do we have to think about with restrooms? What do we have to think about differently with locker rooms? Because different circumstances and
But if it
situations.
gets deactivated tonight, we go back to the old process, which is, can the student who's not trans have access to the bathroom that they're comfortable with, which was allowed in the past?
It was.
And so that's what we would be doing tomorrow.
So again, yes, that's what we would be doing.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Bathrooms.
it doesn't matter if, or locker room, because that's what the policy states. And the student stated that they were given access to the locker room and bathroom.
And I know, you know, you and I have had some conversations, you've shared it in public, that you were presented situations. Administration was not presented situations that were concerning or raised concerns, or where anyone felt as if their privacy had been violated.
Sure.
Again, I think we need to talk about that more. I feel a little differently about locker rooms. We need to talk through that and the structure of our locker rooms and how individuals may experience being in a locker room and doing what typically happens in a locker room.
But to be clear, if a student who's not trans feels more comfortable in the female bathroom, are they going to be given access to that bathroom?
That's not typically our practice, no. It's not typically our practice. We were focused on trans students.
But we have heard from current students who are not trans that state that they will use whatever bathroom they want. I'm telling you of a former student who emailed me that stated, I have told you that students in our school district have stated there are non-trans students in the opposite sex bathrooms and locker rooms. I know they haven't come directly to the administration. My question is, this policy gets deactivated tomorrow. Will a student who is gay be given access to whatever bathroom they choose?
That has not been an accommodation we have afforded in the past. Policy 103 does not call that out in that same way. That has not been an accommodation, and Mr. Saylor, I should say, that I am aware of, just to clarify and qualify that. I am not aware of that happening. This was about transgender students who identify very strongly with a particular gender, and they have been accommodated through Policy 103. And again, very few cases of them, they've been accommodated based upon the language there.
What about the accommodation for women who just want to go into a bathroom with biological women? Will there be an accommodation made for them?
I think, you know, you've brought up that point many times, Mr. Keenan, and again, I think we need to talk more about it. And what does that mean, an accommodation for women?
But we're looking for tomorrow. So we talk a lot about empathetic situations and showing empathy, and we talk about marginalized communities and how we don't care about our marginalized communities. We don't really care about our Catholic students or Orthodox Catholic or Christian students. We don't care about our Orthodox Jews or Hasidic Jews. We don't care about our religious Muslim families, because we really just say, they should just go to parochial school. They should pay to go somewhere else. They don't fit in this community, because we don't care about their religious views. So I'm trying to understand the scope and sequence of tomorrow. This board might tonight deactivate the policy, and now we're going to go back to policy 832. You and I had conversations when I first joined the board about policy 832 and about the two words in that entire policy that I disagreed with, right? And we stated that that policy, and the policy states, by the way, that policy states that it's for 832 only. 832 only. It doesn't state that those two words go for everybody else, for every other policy. That policy specifically states it's just talking about that specific policy. But I want to understand if a student wants to have access to the locker room tomorrow that they feel comfortable with, are they going to be given that? We have co-ed after-school curricular activities where there are boys and girls together, right? If the boy feels comfortable changing with the girls, are they going to be allowed that?
No.
Why? That would go against policy 003, right? We're not
But
gonna,
if they're not transgender, no.
So do we keep a transgender list? I'm confused now.
Well,
So
that's the very point. It wasn't an issue because it was not something that was overt or done intentionally to push back against policy. And if I could, I want to go back to we don't really care about Orthodox Catholics, et cetera. That's not true. You're not speaking for the administration.
Not for the
here.
administration, correct.
Please.
Yeah.
Because those are not true statements.
Yeah, not from the administration, correct.
Yeah.
So we talk about, for instance, Norristown Area School District, and they have very specific policies. They have policies that allow a transgender student or a student who identifies as another gender. Because they're you know, if you look at the spectrum of genders that have some of these sites have, there are like 32 different genders now, and you could be transgender one day and not transgender the next day potentially. But they have policies in place where you could actually go on an overnight trip and stay with the boys or stay with the girls if it makes them feel comfortable. That's what those policies lead to, right? Is that something we would put together and feel comfortable with? And then would we alert parents? There was just an article in the news that a school district had an overnight trip and they forgot accidentally to alert one of the parents in the room, and the kid kind of went like, why is there someone from the opposite sex in my hotel room? Is that the policies that you're looking forward to building over the next few months?
Am I looking to Norristown Area School District policies as models for ours? No, I'm not doing that right now. Absolutely not. And again, it's not a unilateral Barb Russell decision. Policy is developed by the board with input from administration.
But we're in a situation where, like, we say, well, we're going to listen to those people on that side of the room because we're empathetic. We're not going to listen to those people because we don't care.
Mr.
Or-
Saylor, how
or-
did we get that
Well, hold on, I'm not
policy
there
to
yet.
begin with, though?
I'll get to, because, yeah.
Okay.
Or we're going to listen to those people because we're MAGA extremists, and we're not going to listen to those people because they're liberal. That's where we are. We're talking about a policy. Let me ask you one last question. When we do the data presentation in January, one of your silos is going to be how many male students and female students we have in our school district, correct?
Right.
Can you define a female student?
It's what's in the system.
Can you
That's
define?
how we numerically present them.
What is a female student to you? When I first met you and I did my first board walkthrough, we were in a room. I think we were in the high school, and they were developing off of a printer, like a 3D laser printer, and we were talking about how many more female students take these classes. What did you mean by female students?
The gender is female. It's identified as female. An individual views themselves as a female, and we can actually numerically count them based on what's in our system.
That's what you meant 2 years ago?
You know, I didn't think about it 2 years ago, honestly, and even now, you know, I don't necessarily unpack it in the way that I think you're looking for right now.
Isn't it accurate, though, that a parent can, at some point, once the child, depending on where they are in their transition process, they can formally have everything in the system changed?
That's correct. That's correct.
So, at some point, when you are doing the male and female data,
that's where it comes from, and that's what it's based upon.
So, when it says female, it could really be transgender students included within that data.
It could, yes.
It depends on, okay.
If
The other thing I would like to point out is that all of these questions are really, they're honestly thoughtful questions. They're things that we have to think about. We do need to think about locker rooms and field trips and where do we want to go in the process? How far into this do we want to go? We want to, again, we want to protect our transgender students, but we also want to be considerate and protect the the feelings and beliefs of others as well. And how do we find that balance? But we can't do that sitting here and grilling Dr. Russell in one meeting. It's something that has to go to policy. And quite frankly, I believe I kind of sat here and did the same thing when we didn't go to policy. I sat here and I said, we can't vote these things through when we don't hash out. We can't put the cart before the horse. I believe I said that verbatim. Is that we need to be able to go and we need to sort through these questions. We can't keep putting all of this stuff out there without having all of these questions answered. Yet we put this policy through without the thought of the marginalized group and how traumatic it would be for a group that we know has a very high risk of suicide rates and self-harming and risk and other high risk factors. And we just threw it out there without really considering the repercussions. And now we're trying to at least go back to, okay, we're going to go back to right where we started from, and we're going to do it right this time. And we're going to really think about all of their issues and concerns that they have and that they are valid. And we're going to think about all the ones that you brought up that are also valid. And we're going to try and really hash through them. Because I'm not 100% sure either as far as, yes, I think the bathrooms are one thing, but you're right, locker rooms bring up a different avenue. Okay, so if we're looking at locker rooms, now need to talk about facilities and how do we do facilities safely. And I mean, it's a whole different thing. But I'm telling you right now, until you've had an 8-year-old sit in front of you wanting to commit suicide because they so deeply feel that their gender is something else and they don't know how to come to terms with that and tell their family because they're afraid their family won't love them if they are honest and open about who they are. I will not be able to sit and be like, oh, we're not going to accept and we're not going to give them empathy and love. And I can't do that because it is something that is true and real. And these families and these children, they're not choosing to put this on themselves. Nobody would choose to go through this pain that comes with being part of that marginalized group, the hatred that they see, the anti-trans signs on the stop signs. Nobody chooses to have that type of hate spotlighted on them when they're 8, when they're 12, when they're 15. So let's all at least come together to say, you know what? We're going to find a way to support all of our students at Perkiomen Valley. Let's get rid of this 720. Let's go to policy next month and really find a way to think through all of these valid questions and concerns and come up with a policy to support them. But let's stop drilling Dr. Russell and putting her on the spot in the heat of the moment when she's one person and this is going to take a village.
Yeah, this is not.
Well, hold on. I
if you
sent
could-
all my
Mr.
questions to
Saylor.
Dr. Russell in advance, so it wasn't drilling or put on the spot. She knew about them at least three or 4 days ago. And I just wanted to say one thing. Dr. Kembley, I respect you, and I read your thesis 2 years ago. The problem is you're never going to get someone like myself and many people in this community to change our thought processes on their males and females. And you're trying to, through policy, change your educational standards. We teach in health, there's a male student and a female student. We don't teach anything else in the school district. Title IX has not changed. Title IX has not changed. They keep pushing the date back. There was just a conversation in Congress last week on Title IX and on gender. And I watched it. This is not an easy conversation to have, but what I've seen over the past few months is if you don't agree with us, if you don't agree with me, you need to be re-educated to why there is a spectrum of gender. And for a lot of people like myself, and listen, I understand, I want to be empathetic, but when you throw out suicide as a topic, as someone in your field, you know that the more you talk about suicide, doesn't necessarily make the suicide rate go down. All we're trying to do is shame people in the community and say, well, if a student commits suicide, it's because you didn't understand them and it's your fault. And that's not true. And I don't know if that's also the right thing to do from an elected official or a counselor. There are many reasons why people commit suicide in this community and in this country. Many, many reasons. They have reasons of being bullied. They have economic reasons. They have religious reasons. There's a plethora of reasons why people commit suicide. There are former military men and women who commit suicide every single minute. It doesn't mean that someone who doesn't want to spend more money in Congress to allocate to get homeless vets off the street, that we want them to commit suicide. But when we bring up suicide, there's no, what is the onus of that? The
So I'm
thought
just going to
process
leave
of
this
that.
with one thing. The idea is called respect in public education. We need to respect all of our students, whether or not we agree with whatever you believe in or don't believe in. And we need to respect that they do come from backgrounds and have differences that you may not understand. And that because we're in public education, we are tasked to provide them with a free, appropriate public education. And they are entitled to that. And that's what I'm going to leave it with. Because I know in my heart of hearts that these students deserve better.
Dr. Campley, thank you. Mr. Fountain, you very explicitly said in your statement that you prepared with regard to this, that this was not about LGBTQ students or their use of the facilities. This was about safety. And so...
No, it's not necessarily about, no, okay. Not necessarily about safety, it's about the equitable use of the bathrooms for all students.
Okay.
All students.
So, but Mr. Saylor's point, I just feel like we're having two parallel conversations, because what I hear you saying and what I agree with you with regard to developing that and also a robust safety policy around that is much different than what Mr. Saylor is saying. What Mr. Saylor seems to be saying, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, is that you want to focus specifically on the use of facilities by LGBTQ individuals.
No. What does someone's sexual attraction to a woman have anything to do with a bathroom? You said LGBTQ. What does someone being gay or lesbian have to do with what bathroom or locker room they have access to?
So it doesn't have its identity, though. So you're
different. I believe the argument for Title IX is poppycock, for lack of a more educated word, and I believe that it is. I believe that when we alter the meaning and process of what Title IX was about, and the reasoning behind Title IX, and we start to say that that you could take this person's gender and give them access to something else, yeah, I disagree with that. I question, though, when you say, like, what does a male student who's gay, who's attracted to another male student, what does that have to do with using a female bathroom?
It doesn't.
Why do we say LGBTQ?
Why did I say that?
Yeah, what does the L have to do, or the G have to do, or the B have to do with the bathroom or locker room? What does it have to do with anything? I'll give you the T. I give you that. I think it's a blanket term with regards to a segment of the student population that is affected specifically by the exclusion allowed within this 720, in my view. What would I'm still asking, if you're a gay student, a male gay student, or if you're a female lesbian student, where are you being excluded for this bathroom policy or locker room policy?
I would argue, if you wanted to have a philosophical discussion with regards to where the gay student would come in to an accommodation,
yes,
I would argue that there are very many lesbian and gay students in this building that do not feel safe using the restroom of their biological gender.
That is the exact same question I just asked Dr. Russell. It is the exact email I got from the student from a couple years ago.
And so I
know that the high school allowed them to use the female bathroom, even though they're denying it. The student's not going to lie to me. What was the reason? He wasn't voting for me. He came very clear not to vote for me. He was also, don't even contact us again. So why would he lie on the story that happened, right?
Well, this isn't about votes.
He even gave me his address.
This is not about votes.
No, I understand, but this is why the person contacted me. Here's my address. don't contact us again. Don't drop a mailer off at my house. I'm not voting for you. I'm lucky enough that when I was in the school and you weren't in charge as a gay
I was
student,
given this accommodation.
I was given this accommodation.
Understood.
We're just told that doesn't happen, but we know that's not true. It does happen. But you're suggesting that that's good to have, that if you're a gay student, you're not trans, you're a gay student, if you feel more comfortable in the girls' bathroom, we
That's
should
not what I'm suggesting.
You just said that was good.
No, I'm suggesting that there are many gay and lesbian students that do not feel safe using the biological bathroom.
And do you think they should be afforded to use the other one?
I think that they should be afforded an accommodation to allow them to feel safe.
Well, we disagree with that because I don't know
And
what you
that's
mean
okay.
by that. We have the
But
single
that's,
stalls.
but,
Yep,
and
yeah.
so that is therefore
So
why there needs
yeah.
to be a policy conversation with
Create
regards to what.
a co-ed locker room and bathroom.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. And I am not in. And
Yeah.
You and I, by the way, are not in charge of enforcing any of it. We're in charge of making sure administration enforces it. So what was done with 720, it was forced on administration to enforce it. So your question to Dr. Russell, as if she was on like the court of law on a stand, is that somehow you want to know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, after this was forced through on a 5-4 vote, what was going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so now it's literally just going to go back to what happened before that tomorrow. Mrs. Sadler, do you have anything to add?
I was just listening to this great discussion. And the one thing I would like to say is I actually agree with Mr. Leggett. Obviously, you can tell people are very passionate about their opinions in reference to this policy. And the one thing that I keep thinking about is administration. They're the ones that have to implement whatever policy we adopt and develop. And the fact that they really didn't have any voice in the development of and the adoption of 720, I have a little concern with that. And I know that we're really concerned about the safety of students. And I'm really torn, to be honestly truthful, in reference to how I feel in reference to whether we should, get rid of the policy tonight, keep it, and go to policy next month and kind of rehash it and go through it with the support of the administration. But I think I'm leaning towards what Mr. Liggett said in reference to really just looking at this policy again, not doing anything with it right now. Not doing anything with it right now, but I really believe we need to have the voice of our administration at the table. They're an integral part of the conversation in an adoption of any policy that we come up with relative to the bathroom. Because guess who's not in the school building every day? The school board members are not, but it's the administrators and the teachers that are in the building that are going to have to implement this policy and make sure that our children are safe. So I'm leaning more towards agree with Mr. Liggett in reference to if we keep this policy till next month, we go to policy, we really hash through this. It's very emotional. This is very emotional, and you can tell that everybody's very emotional and passionate. We all want all of our students to feel safe. I don't like the fact that we have students who can't even enjoy their senior year of high school because they don't feel safe. I don't know about you, but senior year as a parent, you're so excited about your student's senior year of high school, but we have parents who can't enjoy that time with their child because of the policies that we're implementing. So I really think we really need to take a hard look at this and make sure that whatever policy we adopt, that we can really accommodate and meet the needs of all of our students. And is it going to be challenging and difficult to do? Yes, but we have to come together. We have to compromise in some areas. Of course, there's going to have to be compromise, but we have to try to do what's best for all of our students, not just some, but for all of our students.
Thank you, Mrs. Sadler. Mr. McKinney, did you have something to add?
I did. And Mr. Saylor, I truly appreciate your comments tonight. There was a lot there, and I was trying to keep up. You had mentioned hearing from former students, current students in regards to being gay. What is the prevalence of that? Like, is it a lot of students, a few students? And I'm not being flip. I'm just curious, like, what the prevalence is. So I'm just trying to get a sense of that.
You mean how many students came to myself or Mrs. Mayers with stories about people
Yes.
from
It could be a ballpark. It doesn't necessarily, I don't expect
At
you to say
least-
39, like, you know.
No, 9 that I could name 9 stories right away that popped to the head. One story from a student who's not trans, but he's gay, that sometimes he uses the girls' room. A former student emailed with his story. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate.
Let me, yes, I understand that yourself and Ms. Sadler and Ms. White and all that, they didn't like the rush through process of it. I think myself and some other board members at that time didn't believe the information we were being presented from administration, and we wanted to, where there was no policy, to put a policy together really quick. So, yeah, I mean, multiple students, I would say at least 9 that I'm going through my brain right now, students that approached us afterwards that told us stories. And this included after-school activities, this included the locker rooms, it included a lot.
And I appreciate that because it gives context to a lot of different things, whatever. Also, you threw a lot of things in there, especially like folks in their faith journey and, how they may not feel supported in the school district or whatever. And I'm just curious, are you an advocate for DEI then? Because that comes down to, like, that covers all of that. So I'm just curious if you would, because I'm all about wanting to, if that's the case here, whatever, then that's another issue we need to tackle. If people who are trying to follow a faith journey don't feel respected, welcomed in this community, that's a problem, whatever. So I welcome you onto the DEI train. So.
I would say to Mr. McKinney that my faith in DEI has changed since October 7th, and seeing what's going on at the University of Pennsylvania and some of the statements that their DEI have made, and not just the University of Pennsylvania, but other elite universities. So at this time, I would say that if Dr. Russell thought it was important to have a DEI at Perkiomen Valley, I have never voted against an administration suggestion that she has made. But right now, when I look at universities and elite universities in our country, DEI to me means anti-Semitic.
I think as we talk about DEI or whatever, it's a big ball, so to narrow it down to that and to point to a few college presidents who did not speak to what their communities were hoping they would say, whatever, I would like to think about Perkiomen Valley and what that means for us and how we deal with that and how we address that or whatever. Because as a person of color, I agree, anti-Semitism is just as horrible as racism. But I do not hear the same clamor about how people of color are treated in a way that, like, this issue that's coming out of the Middle East has happened now. And it's unfortunate in both areas, so I think we have to address it, we have to deal with it, but we have to, again, try to get to the matter for everyone, so and I know your faith tradition is Jewish or whatever, and I feel deeply with those who have experienced such tragedy and loss, due to this conflict, but I think we need to, as a community and as people and as human beings, whatever, we've got to figure it out, so. But thank you for sharing your thoughts and your comments tonight or whatever. And it's hard conversations and hard topics or whatever, but if you're up for it, so am I, brother, so thank you.
Dr. Russell, did you want to have any closing additional items to point out before we have a vote?
The only thing one thing I would like to share, Mr. Saylor, I know you and I have talked about some of the situations that were reported directly to you, but did not appear to be reported to administration. I wasn't aware of them anyway. Principals weren't aware. I would encourage individuals that come to you to seek out a trusted adult in the school systems, whatever the school may be, elementary, middle, or high school, and share some of those so that administration can be made aware. And then again, have more context to sometimes the concerns that are brought forward. That would be really helpful.
Well, I did tell you the one student who did seek out an adult in a school, and the adult in the school told the student that maybe they need to change their thought process.
Yeah. More conversation, but those situations that are brought to your attention would be ones that would really be helpful for us to know about too. So if you can be comfortable and redirecting individuals.
Always do.
That would be
Always
really,
do.
and I appreciate that then. And again, I appreciate process. In this district, we have always followed a process when it comes to policy. The committee's purpose is to develop, discuss, review policy, and then ultimately bring it to the board for implementation. This is a tough situation. I was not in favor of the process to implement the policy, and real-time, day-to-day, in administration's view, and I'm looking to Mr. Saylor because he's mentioned this a few times, we were not aware of any issues or challenges because of the few students who are transgender using a bathroom aligned to their gender identity. We weren't aware of them, so there was no problem to solve in my view. I'm also really empathetic to a couple of families who are directly impacted by this. So it is a very challenging situation that we now find ourselves in. While I advocate, and initially came here tonight to advocate, this policy goes back to policy committee. That it isn't necessarily deactivated or suspended, I have had some conversations that have influenced my thinking, and people are touched by this and they're affected by it. Administration will support whatever decision the board makes. It's not an easy one. And again, I just hope moving forward, before something like this is implemented for the district and has the impact that it has in terms of creating confusion and a lack of understanding or mutual understanding on both sides of the issue, that we have more conversation before a decision is made or action is taken.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. I appreciate all of the conversation and debate back and forth and the respectful manner that it occurred in. Mrs. Widener, roll call vote, please. And just to reiterate, the motion is to deactivate policy 720, use of restroom and locker room facilities.
Dr. Campley?
Yes.
Mr. Fountain?
No.
Mr. Keenan?
No.
Mr. Liggett?
No.
Mr. McKinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Sadler? Mr. Saylor?
No.
Dr. Weston?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
4 yeses. Motion fails.
Understood. So with that, this policy will stay in place until next month, at least until next month. The policy committee reconvenes on January 23rd, and I look forward to much more conversation around it at that time. 9.11 is a request for a motion to approve agreements for alternative educational placements. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Second. A motion and a second. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. We're in section 10, which is the closing items. 10.01, comments from the audience. Are there any comments from the audience?
Hello again, Terry, Collegeville Borough. I'm really disappointed in the board for not resetting this policy and revoking policy 720 because you just voted for my child to again, miss 20 minutes of class time. You also just voted for the fact that he can't use the bathroom all day, and that will continue for months and months as this, goes on. I do appreciate the dialogue that went back and forth today. I think there was really good conversation. There's a lot that needs to be done yet to talk about safety in the bathrooms for all students. I 100% support that. But, I hate to, I'm on the fence because I hate to just say, yeah, revoke the policy, because I didn't like the way it was rushed and rammed down people's throats without any real thought to infrastructure, how it was going to affect the administration, how it was going to affect students, how it was going to be enforced. It was just, let's do it. So while I'd like to have it revoked, I think it's right to follow the policy the way it's supposed to be and not just make up our own rules. But as these conversations continue, you guys please, and I've said this before when I've gotten up here to speak, you need to consult subject matter experts in this. It isn't about your opinions, your beliefs, your biases, and what you want, okay? As Ms. There we go. There's kids, this affects kids in all the schools. The elementary school, there's kids. And, you know, the supposed incident that occurred at the beginning of the school year where maybe it was a male that walked into a female bathroom, but they weren't really sure. That could have been my son. He's transgender. And that could have been him that supposedly was seen. But now, you know, he can't even go to the bathroom. He's got to wait all day. And I said this to the board before. I want you to go about your day tomorrow and every day for the rest of the week and get up, get to your commute to work, work all day, go home, and not use the bathroom at all until you're able to go home. That's what he has to experience, along with every other kid that's in this group that you guys have now voted against. So I'm really disappointed. I look forward to additional conversations, and I suggest that you come to that meeting prepared, because if you're just going to come and argue about biases and opinions and what you think, that's not acceptable. Have the subject matter experts. Get their advice, because you're not the experts. And talk to the students, talk to the families. Again, somebody said, you know, to be a parent of a child in this situation, do you think I chose this? I was blessed with my child being who they are, and I love him for who he is. Nobody chooses this.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Hi, I'm Marion McKinney, Collegeville. I appreciate the conversation and the work that you're going to do. I also ask that you, because we're basically talking about human elimination, right? They need to eliminate, right? Using the bathroom. Many of the students, some of them don't even go to the bathroom, just like the mother said. I had a student who did not go to the bathroom all day, waited all day to come home. I'm like, you're going to have some health issues. So please. I would also encourage you to, can you please talk with the students? Like, ask them what's actually happening in this environment with regards to where they're studying, where they have to be every single day. The other thing that I'm concerned about is, and I should have reported this last year and I didn't, and I'm probably going to get crucified when I get home, but that's okay. I'm concerned about what happens in the boys' bathroom and how some of these boys behave, especially our athletes, right? Last year, there was a situation where a student was held down by other students at an event off campus, and his pants were pulled down and his genitals were exposed. When I found out about what happened, I was livid. I contacted one of the mothers and I told them that if this would have happened to my son, I would have been pressing criminal charges for sexual misconduct. If this behavior, I've been in higher ed for over 30 years. If this would happen on a college campus and your sons are going to go to college and they do this nonsense on a college campus, your son will be charged with sexual misconduct, sexual assault, and you will find yourself in court. So I would behoove the court, the board, to educate, parents need to educate their sons and honestly take a look and ask the students what's happening, the bullying that's happening, the students and the men that are being violated in the bathroom in this school district. You know, you're worried about a trans student going to go urinate. You need to be worried about, is your son, who's an athlete, being violated and exposed because somebody thinks it's funny and boys are going to be boys. And so, again, I highly encourage you to do that. And lastly, my son, when he was a sophomore, he was slammed up against the locker, in the locker room, called the N-word, and my husband and I reported it. And this happens too many times on our in PV, and that needs to be addressed as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments?
Heidi Brown, Lower Frederick. First of all, too, as far as our students bullying, a lot of times I learn that from parents that bully, is from what I brought up before, too. Parents and adults that engage in bullying will most likely have children that engage in bullying. Second of all, with the bathroom issue, trans student and a regular student, who gets to decide which student's more important? Okay? Who gets to decide that? Because we had a student in the beginning of the year, a girl, that was afraid to go in the bathroom. She was uncomfortable. So does she not to get to go to the bathroom all day? Who gets to decide that? Who's more important? Just curious.
Thank you. Are there other comments?
I know everybody's getting tired, myself included. Let me just, Heidi's a little shorter than me. Just kidding. Amber Dorr, Skipback Township. First, I wanted to reinforce my point from last week around the importance of the community's need for visibility of the process of removing the pornographic books from the school libraries and what books those will be that are being removed and from which schools. Secondly, obviously I have some prepared comments and then just some ad hoc comments. Secondly, some may wonder why I care to come and speak at these meetings. I know it's been called out on social media. The reason I speak up is because I care about the community, the people in the community, and most importantly, the students and kids who we've lived here for 20 years. They are the future. Having students in the school isn't the only reason community members come to these meetings and speak. Many families like ourselves moved to PV because it was a quiet community conveniently located just outside of Philly, had a smaller student body and a smaller district from those surrounding us, with a great reputation. PV has been known for having strong academics and athletic programs. Programs within a nurturing, safe environment. Tired eyes. Former PV grads, I hear, move back to the area when they have kids to start a family because they so enjoyed their school experience here. However, it seems like things have changed. What we have heard loud and clear tonight and over the past several months from parents and students alike, PV is failing all students in the community in creating an environment where students feel safe and can focus on learning regardless of how you identify. Families move here to get away from the violent behavior that happens in city schools, but as we've seen, it's now right here in our backyards at PVSD. Our administration, board, and community must be the example and stand up against violence and unsafe spaces, including the girls' bathroom and locker rooms. Our taxes are some of the highest locally. Paying to move your kids out of PV schools isn't feasible for most, but more importantly, that should not be the answer of our families. PV must do better, and as a community member, I speak for many who actually don't feel comfortable coming here. We are eager to see how this administration moves forward. And I'll skip those comments to make one additional observation from the conversation. Mrs. Campley, you mentioned the need for the policy 720 made in part because of the LGBT community. And Mr. Fountain, thank you for bringing up the father that has the autistic daughter, that he spoke of how his daughter doesn't feel comfortable. So based again on what Mrs. Brown said, what decision? We've talked a lot about the LGBT being marginalized, but there are biological students that won't go to the bathroom today and hold it, and I'm sorry for anybody that has to go through that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional comments?
Hi, Janice Sheridan, Skipback Township. I didn't plan on speaking, so I don't have anything written like I normally do. But what I would like to say is when you say that policy 720 came out of nowhere, I think the policy before it came out of nowhere because no one was aware of the fact that bathrooms were available to gender identity. I think we always knew that the boys go to the boys' room and the girls go to the girls' room. But that's what I had to say about that. When archaeologists dig up skeletons, they determine whether they're male or female according to their bone structure. So whether a child is transgender or not, their biological structure does not change. And I don't, I guess, understand what's wrong with the policy that affords boys rooms, girls rooms, and trans to have their own bathrooms. I mean, they are by their acknowledgement, a different sex. So a bathroom for a different sex only makes sense. You cannot put the onus of what they're feeling on the children who deserve private spaces, like girls and boys. And the danger thing, I mean, in bathrooms, I think everybody kind of took that out of, blew it up, because I think the transgender bathroom issue is not strictly, but the biggest part of it is taking safe spaces away from boys and girls. Just because a small, different sex feels marginalized is the word you use. I mean, I have an autistic grandson, and I had a marginalized granddaughter. When they had problems, they came to us. We talked it over. We explained to them what things were going to happen in school, what might happen, but let us know, and we'll deal with it at home. And so far, knock on wood, they're doing really, really well. So I would just, we sit here and we talk about how we're going to get this solved. We're not. If we give you, if you have an option for transgender students, but you just don't want it, then nothing is going to be solved. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, I know, Jill Hall, Collegeville, yada, yada. Okay. I feel like a broken record, but other parents are saying it too, and I really, really hope that you take this into consideration. There are people who want to help us get this right, and they're not saying that it's, you know, the Norristown School District is getting it right or another school district. There are consultants who are trained in these areas who can teach us a lot about the science of sexuality and gender, that are things that normal people, average people, are not necessarily expected to know. There are also experts who help communities deal with trauma and violence, who help communities deal with the situation that we now find ourselves in. And I think it would be really helpful if the school board raised their hands and cried uncle and said, okay, it's time to get some professional help, because the infighting has got to stop. And by the way, I think that it's important to state to the community at large, our behavior as adults is what our kids are following. I said this earlier in the week. I admit that in the past, I have not always chosen my words as carefully as I should have. And I know that a number of us, if we're being honest, can say the same thing. My New Year's resolution, starting early, is to do better. And I'm hoping that there are a number of people in this community that will make the same New Year's resolution and will make some progress. As far as 720 is concerned, it obviously needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. The question is whether it's appropriate to go back to the earlier policy. And the truth of the matter is, has 720 been enforced as it is? Is it going to make any difference tomorrow to the students themselves? Because as I understand it, 720 has basically been unenforceable. And if that's the case, then why keep it? Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments?
Never thought I'd come up here twice, being my first meeting, but you know, it's been very interesting conversation. So I don't think anybody here is saying that any student is more important than another. I don't think anybody on either side of the political aisle would be saying that. We're all here for the same purpose, but again, we have certain biases, and we really need to get together. From what I understand, the last board rushed it through before they were 5-4, rushed it through before it was 5-4. And, you know, we all play politics. We all know the game. What we need to do, if we really have the interests of our children at heart, is we need to get together, go through the committee, the policy committee, and figure it out. It's not an easy job. It's going to be really tough to figure out because of the differences that you all have on the board and the differences in this room, how we raise our children. I think it was almost, I've seen it just tonight. It's been very coy in how you're doing it, but it's partisan bullying. What you believe, some people don't believe or understand about LGBTQ. They don't agree with it. You're born one way, that's all there is to it. I gotta tell you, I have some in my family that are LGBTQ, some friends, and you grow up traditionally and you think, well, that's not right. You're born a boy, you're born a girl. No, this has been for ages. It just so happens that now you have the technology to make the changes. So this is, it's a strange world we're living in. It's not the way we grew up, but this is how it is. The other thing I wanted to close with, and I wanted you all to think about, is over the last few weeks since this assault happened, it saddened me a lot to see this on the news. And I hear from friends of mine that are outside, I thought you lived in a good area. And that's really embarrassing, to see that on the news and, hear that. We do live in a good area. I live in a great neighborhood with great neighbors, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do too. And that assault was not how we raise our children. And whoever the security guards are, they should be on the spot. I mean, there's only a couple of them, but somebody should be able to contact them, and they should be able to take care of, business in a more expedient way. But again, think about this. Get yourselves on that policy committee together with Dr. Russell and other people in the administration and make it work. It's not easy, but that's what you guys all pledged to do when you ran for office.
Thank you. Are there additional public comments? Seeing none, go ahead.
Tim Jagger, Lower Frederick. First, I just want to thank the board members that decided not to deactivate this policy. That was very strong on your part. And I hear a lot of talk about nothing has happened yet. Well, something has happened because I was told my daughter could not go to the bathroom all day. So something has happened. And at the same time, no, it wasn't anything major. But the school has security guards, right? The school is hiring police officers, right? Is this because we're just being proactive? Because I feel this bathroom policy is being proactive, put in place to prevent something from happening and not waiting for something to happen where you have an incident, where you have to have the police here, something drastic of like what happened the other week. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional public comment?
Shona McGee, skip back. I just want to know what the board is going to do for the children that aren't safe to come to school. My child, senior year of high school, destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Now I have to pay for an education for my kid through online schooling through PV? It's crap. I'm furious. Mr. Saylor, you sat there and pulled my child aside and told him that you love them, you appreciate them, and you see them. You're a liar.
Are there any other public comments? Seeing none, are there any board comments?
One of the things, well, there's a few things that I want to point out is, one of the things that I think we take for granted and we overlook all too often is we have a vital, untapped resource in this room and on this board, and that's Ms. Trumba and Mr. Kenworthy. They're the ones living this experience and this existence, and we don't even ask them what they think. So I apologize for that because I should have asked you, how do you feel? What are your thoughts? Because you're living this experience every day. So in the future, I hope that you feel the liberty and the license to actually express yourselves and to allow us who aren't going through this experience to know what it's like to be in the buildings every day. Also, I'd like to say to Dr. Russell and your staff, you are dancing this dance with amazing grace. And I truly appreciate the work that you and your staff and the teachers put in to try to make this work. And then finally, I would say to Mr. Saylor, Mr. Fountain, and to my colleagues who voted, for keeping this policy in place, whatever, I hope that, people do not hold you in some type of contempt. I hope that we're all voting our conscience and we're all voting what we fully believe and fully see as moving something forward in regards to making this a better community. And I'm saddened whenever someone votes a certain way, then they are vilified, and I hope that does not happen to anyone who had a vote tonight. So in saying that, I truly appreciate and I'm thankful for what I saw as actual constructive conversation tonight. The hard questions, the hard comments, and I want to just thank everyone for coming to it with a sense of civility and compassion and courtesy and kindness for one another. And I hope we can continue that, but again, let's do this in a way that, again, that shows that we can see one another's humanity and not point fingers or call names, except for you, Mr. Saylor, when you use MAGA Republicans, but I'm not going to hold that against you. But thank you.
Are there other board comments? Seeing no others, I will echo Mr. McKinney's point about involving student voice. I actually was going to ask specifically that you speak with regards to the conversation that we were having with 720, but I didn't want to put either of you on the spot, or I guess on blast, to really, without a prior heads up, because I know that that's uncomfortable to be put on the spot like that. I did that to Mr. Leggett when we started the meeting, so I didn't want to do the same thing to you. But please, as you review the agenda when it's presented, if you could going forward, keep in mind some of the things that you may have some commentary on, and we really. I would like to have that engagement with you and the peace of mind and the point of view that you bring to the table. So I didn't want to give you a false,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say to students listening or students that are here, I don't see much, but if they want to come to us to voice this student's opinion, then we can share that obviously to the board. Obviously, we don't want to share just our opinions, but we want to be the voice of the students. So we just want to make sure the students come to us first before we give an opinion to you guys. And we've had conversations with Dr. Russell, with many other students, like in leadership discussions. So we've heard both sides, we've heard everything, and we just want to make sure we get everybody's voice before we bring it to you guys.
I really appreciate that, and
Yeah,
I
thank
want you to know, in your absence last week, Ms. Tremba really held it down for you. So she
Yeah, I heard.
she
I heard. She did
spoke
great.
up last week, and we were very proud of her. So we look forward to that going forward. So thank you very, very much for your service in the
Thank you.
board.
I didn't even know you were missing, but
Come on, let's
but one of the things I would like to say, Drew, is don't ever discount your voice. Even if it is just your voice, all voices have value and worth. So if you don't hear from any other students, you still have an opinion. So don't see it as like you can't talk to us, because it's just your opinion.
And thank you for being an open line of communication to the students that are in your charge. Any other board member comments? Seeing none. 10.03 is the notice of video disclaimer. 10.04 is adjournment. I adjourn.